The channel churns beneath the landing craft. Dawn has not yet broken on June 6, 1944, and 225 men of the 2nd Ranger Battalion wait in silence. Their faces are blackened with burnt cork and grease. The air smells of diesel fuel, vomit, and fear. Lieutenant Colonel James Earl Rudder, a former football coach from Texas, scans the horizon through sea spray-covered binoculars. He can barely make out the dark silhouette of Pointe du Hoc against the night sky, a 100-foot cliff jutting from the coastline of Normandy like a sentinel. Sergeant William Elrod Petty checks his climbing equipment for the 7th time. The modified London Fire Department ladders, the ropes, the grappling hooks, all will be tested against vertical cliffs under enemy fire in less than an hour. His hands tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the constant vibration of the landing craft against rough seas. Around him, young men, some barely out of high school, stare at photographs of girlfriends and wives. Many of these photos will be recovered later, soaked in seawater and blood. In bunkers atop the cliffs, German soldiers from the 352nd Infantry Division man the massive artillery pieces aimed directly at Utah and Omaha beaches. 6 155mm howitzers capable of raining destruction upon the Allied invasion forces. Intelligence reports suggest approximately 125 to 150 Wehrmacht troops guard the position, nestled in a complex network of concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, and trenches. Lieutenant George Kirchner clutches the compass in his pocket. His mission? Lead dog company to scale the eastern side of the point. He knows the intelligence briefings by heart, has studied the aerial reconnaissance photographs until he could trace the outlines of German fortifications in his sleep. What the photographs don't show are the minds behind the machine guns. Young Germans who, like him, have been thrust into this meat grinder of history. A wave crashes over the bow of the landing craft, soaking the men. The salt water stings their eyes. Above them, Allied bombers should have pounded the German positions, but the weather had forced them to release their payloads too early. Most bombs landed inland, leaving the coastal defenses intact. This crucial detail remains unknown to the Rangers as they approach the Norman shore. As the first hint of gray light touches the horizon, the men of the 2nd Ranger Battalion prepare to attempt something that military strategists had deemed nearly impossible: scaling sheer cliffs under direct enemy fire to neutralize guns that could massacre thousands of Allied soldiers. What awaits them is not merely combat, but a descent into a very real hell that will be etched into history with blood and courage. 0545. Hours. The seasickness has taken its toll. Private First Class Leonard Bud Lamell vomits over the side of the LCVP, landing craft, vehicle, personnel, for the 3rd time since leaving the transport ship USS Ben Maitree. The 24-year-old former law student from New Jersey wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, his fingers stiff from cold and salt water. Around him, the other Rangers of Dog Company maintain a tense silence. Many have thrown up what little breakfast they managed to eat. Others haven't eaten at all. The channel is rougher than expected, 6-foot swells that toss the landing craft like toys. The original plan called for a dawn landing, but the naval bombardment is running behind schedule. Lieutenant James Eichner, the communications officer, checks his watch again. They're already 30 minutes behind. "Distance to shore," calls Colonel Rudder over the roar of engines and waves. 3,000 yards, sir. The coxswain's voice barely carries over the din. Rudder turns to his men. His eyes are red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Check equipment one last time. First wave, prepare to deploy." The Rangers check their weapons: M1 Garands, Thompson submachine guns, Browning automatic rifles. Each man carries at least 6 grenades and as much ammunition as he can bear. Some have rocket launchers strapped to their backs. All carry either rope or ladder sections for the climb. The British coxswain, navigating their landing craft, suddenly points. "Aircraft!" The men look up to see the silhouettes of Allied bombers passing overhead toward the beaches. The sound of their engines is oddly comforting. "They'll soften 'em up for us," says Sergeant Petty, not knowing that most bombs would miss their targets by thousands of yards. Private Robert Fruehling makes the sign of the cross. A devout Catholic from Wisconsin, he clutches the small Bible in his breast pocket. Next to him, Private Herbert Epstein, a Jewish soldier from Brooklyn, closes his eyes and whispers the Shema. The first shells from the naval bombardment streak overhead, their whistling followed by distant explosions. The USS Texas, USS Arkansas, and HMS Glasgow have begun their barrage. The vibrations from their 14-inch guns can be felt even through the water. 1,000 yards, calls the coxswain. Colonel Rudder stands, steadying himself against the pitching of the craft. Rangers, today we do the impossible. Those guns must be neutralized before the main landing forces hit the beaches. Thousands of lives depend on us. The cliffs of Pointe du Hoc loom larger now, a dark wall against the lightning sky. Through gaps in the morning mist, the Rangers can see flashes of light, German muzzle flashes. The enemy has spotted them. "They're firing!" shouts Lieutenant Kirchner. The first German artillery shells splash into the water 300 yards to their right. The next salvo will be closer. Incoming! The world around them erupts in geysers of seawater as German 88mm shells find their range. 600 hours. The 10 landing craft carrying the Rangers approach the narrow strip of rocky beach beneath Pointe du Hoc. German machine gun fire rakes the water around them, creating patterns of white splashes that would be beautiful if they weren't deadly. The distinctive sound of the MG-42, the Hitler's buzzsaw, as American soldiers call it, cuts through the air at 1,200 rounds per minute. 20 seconds, yells the coxswain, his face contorted with fear and determination. Colonel Rudder turns to his executive officer, Major Cleveland Lytle. "If I don't make it, you know the objective." Lytle nods grimly. 48 hours earlier, he had tried to have the mission scrubbed, arguing it was a suicide operation. Now he stands ready to die alongside his men. The landing craft hits the rocky shore with a jarring impact that throws several men off their feet. The front ramp drops with a splash. "Rangers, lead the way," shouts Rudder, and plunges into knee-deep water. Private First Class James Eichner is the third man off his craft. The water is shockingly cold. 20 yards to his right, he sees another landing craft take a direct hit from a mortar round. The explosion sends bodies and equipment flying into the air. The screams of the wounded rise above the cacophony of battle. Dog company begins to assemble on the narrow beach. There is precious little cover. Only a thin strip of land before the cliff face rises vertically above them. German defenders have perfect firing positions from above. "Ropes and ladders forward," orders Lieutenant Kirchner. Sergeant Petty and his team rush forward with the rocket-propelled grappling hooks and the sectional ladders. The beach is wet and rocky, making it difficult to move quickly in waterlogged gear. Private Lomel looks up at the imposing cliff face. It seems even higher than the 100 feet they were briefed on. Strands of barbed wire are visible along the top edge. Somewhere up there, German machine gunners have them in their sights. The first rocket-propelled grappling hook fires with a whoosh, trailing rope behind it. It arcs upward, hooks catching on the cliff edge. A second and third follow. "First climbers, move out," Kirchner orders. Private First Class Frank South is first to the ropes. He begins to climb, hand over hand, boots finding purchase against the rough cliff face. Halfway up, a German potato masher grenade tumbles down, exploding 10 feet below him. The concussion nearly knocks him from the rope, but he holds on. On the eastern side, the first ladder section extends upward. Rangers begin to climb. The Germans have begun dropping grenades and cutting ropes. 3 Rangers fall when their rope is severed, their bodies making sickening sounds as they hit the rocks below. Colonel Rudder moves from group to group, directing the assault. A bullet strikes his backpack, but doesn't penetrate. "Keep moving. We need to get off this beach." The Rangers attack the cliff face with desperate determination. Some climb ropes. Others use the extension ladders. A few find natural crevices and begin free climbing. All do so under constant fire. Private Robert Fruehling reaches for his next handhold when a bullet strikes his helmet, spinning it off his head. Blood trickles into his eyes. He keeps climbing. 6:15 hours. The first Rangers reach the top of the cliff. Staff Sergeant William Elrod Petty pulls himself over the edge, rolls away from the precipice, and immediately engages a German machine gun nest 20 yards to his right. His Thompson submachine gun chatters, cutting down two Wehrmacht soldiers before they can swing their MG-42 in his direction. Private First Class Leonard Lommel is the fifth man up on the eastern side. What greets him is a landscape transformed by Allied bombing, but not as planned. Instead of destroyed German fortifications, he sees a moonscape of bomb craters. The bombardment has cratered the ground but left most of the concrete bunkers intact. "Bangalore torpedoes, forward," calls Lieutenant Kirchner, who has just reached the top. Rangers carrying the explosives rush forward. The Bangalore, a tube filled with explosives, is pushed under the barbed wire defenses. The detonation clears a path through the obstacles. More Rangers pour over the top of the cliff. They assemble into small combat teams as rehearsed countless times in England. Each team has a specific objective: clear bunkers, locate the guns, establish a perimeter. Private Herbert Epstein and Technician 5th grade Joseph Garces move toward a concrete bunker. Epstein pulls the pin on a grenade, counts to 2, and tosses it through the firing slit. The explosion is followed by screams in German. Garces follows with a burst from his BAR. Then they rush the entrance. Inside, the scene is horrific. 3 German soldiers lie dead or dying, their bodies mangled by the grenade blast. Blood covers the walls and ceiling. The metallic smell mixes with cordite and concrete dust. "Clear," calls Garces, his voice tight with tension. On the western approach, Colonel Rudder establishes a command post in a bomb crater. Around him, the battle rages as Rangers clear one German position after another. The sound of grenades and small arms fire is constant. Medic Eugene Motley moves from wounded to wounded, applying sulfa powder and bandages to ghastly injuries. "Sir, the guns aren't in their emplacements," reports Lieutenant Eichner, breathing hard from running between positions. This is unexpected. The entire mission revolves around neutralizing those 6 155mm howitzers. Without them, the Rangers have climbed into hell for nothing. "Find them," orders Rudder. "They have to be somewhere nearby." As if to punctuate his words, a German counterattack begins from the inland side. Fresh troops from the 726th Grenadier Regiment open fire from hedgerows 200 yards away. Bullets snap overhead and kick up dirt around the Rangers' positions. "Perimeter teams, hold the line," Rudder commands. "Gun teams, keep searching." Private First Class Lommel and Sergeant Jack Kuhn decide to push inland. Moving from crater to crater, they advance past the initial German defensive line. After 250 yards, Lommel spots something unusual: a dirt path leading away from the point, with distinctive track marks. "Those look like artillery tracks," he whispers to Kuhn. They follow the path cautiously, Thompson's submachine guns at the ready. After another 100 yards, they come upon an extraordinary sight: all 6 155mm guns, hidden under camouflage netting in an apple orchard. German artillerymen are casually eating breakfast, seemingly unaware that the Rangers have arrived. 6:40, hours. Private First Class Lommel and Sergeant Kuhn observe the German gun position from the edge of a hedgerow. The 6 155mm howitzers are arranged in a semicircle, pointing inland rather than toward the beach. They've been moved from their concrete emplacements, possibly to avoid the expected aerial bombardment. German gunners move around them, but not with any urgency. They have no idea that American forces have already scaled the cliffs. "They're not manned for firing," whispers Lommel. "They're just eating breakfast." "How many?" asks Kuhn. "I count 15, maybe 20. The 2 Rangers are outnumbered, but surprise is on their side, and there is no time to go back for reinforcements. These guns could be operational within minutes once the Germans receive orders to fire. "We take them out now," decides Lommel. "I'll circle left, you go right. Use thermite grenades on the sighting mechanisms." Thermite grenades burn at over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt through the metal of the gun's elevation mechanisms, rendering them useless. They separate, moving silently through the dense hedgerows that define the Norman landscape. Lommel approaches the first gun from behind. A German officer stands nearby, studying a map. With practiced motion, Lommel raises his Thompson and fires a burst. The officer and two nearby gunners fall. The element of surprise now gone, Lommel rushes forward, firing his Thompson at any German who moves. He reaches the first gun, pulls a thermite grenade from his pack, sets it on the breech, and pulls the pin. Across the position, Kuhn has engaged another group of Germans. His Thompson chatters in disciplined bursts. He reaches one of the guns and places his thermite grenade. The thermite ignites with a blinding flash and a shower of molten metal. The heat is so intense that Lommel can feel it through his uniform as he moves to the next gun. German soldiers are now reacting, grabbing weapons and taking cover. One aims a Luger at Lommel, but the Ranger is faster. His Thompson stutters, and the German falls with 3 rounds in his chest. Lommel reaches the second gun, places another thermite grenade. The third gun is 15 yards away, across open ground. He makes a dash for it, bullets kicking up dirt around his feet. He dives behind the gun's shield just as a burst of MG-42 fire tears through the space where he had been. On the other side of the position, Kuhn has disabled 2 guns and is pinned down by fire from a German machine gun nest. Blood stains his sleeve. He's been hit but is still fighting. Lommel places his third thermite grenade, then realizes he's out. He still has 1 gun to disable in his sector. Thinking quickly, he finds the gun's elevation mechanism and uses his thermite grenade to destroy it. For the last gun, he finds a discarded German potato masher grenade, pulls the pin, and jams it into the breech, then runs. The explosion doesn't destroy the gun, but it damages the firing mechanism beyond quick repair. "Kuhn, fall back!" he shouts. Together, the 2 Rangers retreat through the hedgerows, German bullets snapping through leaves around them. Within minutes, they've put several hundred yards between themselves and the now disabled guns. "We did it," gasps Kuhn, clutching his wounded arm. "All 6 guns." "Let's get back to the colonel," says Lommel. "The mission's half done." What they don't know is that holding the position will prove even more difficult than taking it. 7:10 hours. Colonel Rudder studies the hand-drawn map that Private First Class Lommel has just delivered. The guns have been neutralized. The primary mission objective accomplished, but at a steep cost. Of the 225 Rangers who began the assault, fewer than 90 remain unwounded and combat effective, and they are isolated on a promontory of land surrounded by German forces. "Good work, Lommel," says Rudder. "Now we hold until relieved." The original plan called for reinforcement from the beach. The 5th Ranger Battalion and infantry from the 29th Division should be moving inland from Omaha by now. But no friendly forces have appeared, and the radio reports from the beach are grim. The landing at Omaha is bogged down under intense German fire. Lieutenant Elmer Vermeer, Rudder's intelligence officer, crawls into the command crater. "Sir, German reinforcements are moving in from the east and south. At least a company strength." Rudder nods grimly. "Set up defensive positions. Conserve ammunition. We're on our own for now." The Rangers begin to organize their perimeter. The terrain of Pointe du Hoc, now a cratered wasteland from the bombing, offers good defensive positions. The men dig in among the bomb craters and bunkers, establishing interlocking fields of fire. Medic Eugene Motley has set up an aid station in a captured German bunker. The concrete walls offer protection, but the scene inside is nightmarish. A dozen seriously wounded Rangers lie on the dirt floor. Motley moves between them, administering morphine, applying pressure bandages, prioritizing who can be saved and who cannot. Private Robert Fruehling, his head bandaged where the bullet grazed his scalp, helps move a wounded comrade into the bunker. The man's leg has been nearly severed by machine gun fire, hanging by tendons and a strip of flesh. Blood pumps from the wound with each heartbeat. "Put him here," directs Motley, pointing to a space on the floor. Fruehling lays the wounded Ranger down as gently as possible, but the man still screams in agony. The sound echoes off the concrete walls. Motley works quickly, applying a tourniquet above the mangled limb. "Hold him," he orders Fruehling. The medic produces a large syringe of morphine, injects it directly into the wounded man's arm. The screaming subsides to whimpering. then to silence as the powerful opiate takes effect. "Is he going to make it?" asks Fruling. Motley doesn't answer immediately. He's seen too many similar wounds in North Africa and Sicily. Without evacuation to a field hospital soon, the answer is almost certainly no. Infection will set in, followed by sepsis, then death. "If we can get him off this point within 12 hours, maybe," he says finally. Outside, the German counterattack begins in earnest. MG-42 machine guns open fire from the hedgerows, pinning down the Rangers in their positions. Mortar rounds begin to fall, exploding in the cratered landscape and sending deadly fragments in all directions. Private Herbert Epstein is manning a captured German MG-42, with technician Garces feeding the belt. The German weapon is far superior to American machine guns, lighter, with a higher rate of fire. They've positioned it to cover the approach from the south. "Here they come," says Epstein, as shadowy figures appear through the smoke 200 yards away. The German infantry advances in waves, moving from cover to cover. Epstein waits until they're within effective range, then squeezes the trigger. The MG-42 roars at 1,200 rounds per minute, the sound like tearing cloth. German soldiers fall, but others keep advancing. "More ammo!" calls Epstein as the belt runs dry. Garces slams another belt into place, and the deadly fire continues. But for every German who falls, 2 more appear from the hedgerows. They are being pushed back by superior numbers. 8:30 hours. The German counterattack intensifies. Rangers in forward positions fall back under pressure, leapfrogging to secondary defensive lines. Colonel Rudder moves between positions, rallying his men, directing fire. A mortar round explodes 10 yards from him, sending him sprawling into a crater, ears ringing from the concussion. Lieutenant George Kirchner pulls him to cover. "Sir, are you hit?" Rudder shakes his head, trying to clear it. Blood trickles from his left ear. "I'm fine. Status report." "We're being pushed from 3 sides. Ammunition is running low. Still no contact with the beach force." The situation is deteriorating rapidly. Without reinforcement or resupply, the Rangers cannot hold indefinitely. The radio operator has been trying to reach anyone: the ships offshore, the forces on Omaha Beach, the command structure, but communication is spotty at best. In his crater, Private First Class Lommel and 3 other Rangers repel yet another German probe. His Thompson is hot to the touch from sustained firing. Only 2 magazines remain in his ammo pouch. Around him, other Rangers are down to counting individual bullets. "Conserve ammo," he orders. "Single shots, make them count." A German potato masher grenade lands in their crater. Private William Dreyer acts without hesitation, grabbing the grenade and throwing it back in the direction it came from. The explosion is followed by a German scream. "Nice toss," says Lommel. Dreyer doesn't respond. He stares at his hand, where blood wells from a dozen small wounds caused by grenade fragments. The damage isn't severe, but it's 1 more man wounded, 1 more reduction in fighting strength. At the aid station, the situation has become critical. 17 severely wounded men now crowd the bunker, with more arriving. Medic Motley has run out of plasma and is low on morphine. The wounded moan and cry out. The air is thick with the smell of blood, excrement, and fear. Private Fruling helps as best he can, holding wounds closed while Motley stitches, comforting the dying, giving sips of water from his canteen. The man with the mangled leg has developed a fever, the first sign of infection. His skin is hot to the touch, his breathing rapid and shallow. "We need to get these men evacuated," says Motley, wiping sweat from his brow with a bloody hand. "How?" asks Fruling. "We're cut off." Outside, the sound of gunfire is constant. MG-42s chatter from German positions. American BAR gunners respond with their slower, heavier fire. Grenades explode with sharp cracks. Occasionally, the deep crump of a mortar round punctuates the symphony of destruction. Colonel Rudder has moved his command post 3 times as German fire pushed them back. Now positioned in what was once a German communications bunker, he studies his dwindling options. Of his original force, perhaps 70 men remain capable of fighting. Ammunition is critically low. The wounded need evacuation. "Sir," says Lieutenant Eichner, the communications officer. "I've made contact with the destroyer USS Satterley offshore. They're asking for fire coordinates. This is the first piece of good news in hours. Naval gunfire could stem the German counterattack. Give them these coordinates," Rudder indicates on his map. "Danger close." Danger close means the fire will land perilously near friendly forces, within 600 yards. It's risky, but necessary. Within minutes, the distinctive sound of naval shells arrives. A freight train passing overhead. The first salvo lands in the German assembly area to the south. Through his binoculars, Rudder watches German soldiers thrown into the air by the explosions, bodies dismembered, trees shattered. The naval gunfire buys them time, but the fundamental problem remains. They are isolated, outnumbered, low on ammunition, and burdened with wounded. The question is no longer if they can complete their mission. They've done that by destroying the guns, but whether any of them will survive to tell about it. 11 hours. The naval gunfire from the USS Satterley has temporarily halted the German counterattack. In the lull, Rangers improve their positions, redistribute ammunition, and tend to the wounded. Colonel Rudder uses the opportunity to assess his forces and the tactical situation. The news isn't good. Of the original 225 men who began the assault, only 90 remain unwounded and combat effective. Ammunition is running critically low. Many men are down to their last magazine or clip. Some have resorted to using captured German weapons and ammunition. The wounded, now numbering over 60, need evacuation that isn't coming. Lieutenant Eichner approaches Rudder's position, crawling the last few yards to avoid German snipers. "Sir, radio contact with Omaha Beach. The 116th Infantry Regiment reports heavy casualties, but they're pushing inland. Any word on when we can expect relief?" asks Rudder. Eichner shakes his head. "The beachhead is still contested. They're fighting building by building in Vierville. It could be hours or days before they reach us." Days is not an option. Without ammunition or medical supplies, the Rangers cannot hold out that long. Private First Class Lommel has moved to a forward observation position with Sergeant Jack Kuhn. Through gaps in the hedgerows, they can see German forces regrouping beyond the range of accurate small arms fire. "They're bringing up more troops," says Lommel, "and vehicles. I think those are armored cars." Kuhn focuses his binoculars. SDKFZ 222s, machine guns and a 20mm cannon. "If those get within range, we're in trouble." They report back to Rudder, who immediately radios the Satterley for another fire mission. The naval guns respond promptly, shells screaming overhead to impact among the German assembly area. One of the armored cars takes a direct hit, erupting in a fireball that throws its turret 30 feet into the air. But naval gunfire alone cannot protect them indefinitely. The guns can only fire when given precise coordinates, and German forces are becoming more adept at infiltrating through covered approaches that the Rangers cannot observe. In the aid station, conditions have deteriorated further. 2 more Rangers have died of their wounds. The rest suffer in the stifling heat of the bunker, their wounds festering without proper medical attention. Medic Motley moves among them, doing what little he can with dwindling supplies. Private Fruling sits beside the Ranger with the mangled leg. The man's condition has worsened. His skin burns with fever, his breathing shallow and rapid. The wound itself has turned an angry red, with black streaks extending up the thigh. Blood poisoning. Without amputation and antibiotics, death is certain. "Water," croaks the wounded man. Fruling holds his canteen to the man's cracked lips, allowing him small sips. "Hang in there, buddy. Help's coming." It's a lie, and they both know it. No help is coming soon enough for this man. Outside, German snipers have begun to target any movement within the Ranger perimeter. One by one, men are hit as they try to move between positions. The distinctive crack of carabiner 98K rifles is followed by the impact of 7.92mm rounds. Each shot is precisely aimed, the work of experienced marksmen. Private Herbert Epstein, still manning his captured MG-42, spots movement in a farmhouse 500 yards to the east. The glint of sunlight on a rifle scope. "Sniper, second-floor window, farmhouse," he calls to nearby Rangers. Staff Sergeant Frank South, one of the battalion's best marksmen, crawls forward with his M1 Garand. Epstein points out the position. "I see him," says South, settling his rifle on a pile of rubble. He takes aim, controlling his breathing as taught in sniper school. The distance is at the outer edge of the Garand's effective range, but South is confident in his skills. He squeezes the trigger. The M1 fires with its characteristic report. Through his makeshift scope, South watches the German sniper jerk backward, then slump over the windowsill. "Got him," says South without emotion. But for every German eliminated, more appear. The 352nd Infantry Division is committing significant resources to eliminate the Ranger force that has infiltrated their defensive line. The noose is tightening around Pointe du Hoc. 1400 hours. The heat of early afternoon bears down on the embattled Rangers. Water is now as precious as ammunition. Many canteens are empty, and there is no source of fresh water within the perimeter. Men lick their dry, cracked lips, their throats parched from thirst and the dust of battle. Colonel Rudder has ordered strict water discipline, small sips only, prioritizing the wounded. But it's a losing battle against dehydration. Some men have resorted to drinking from muddy bomb craters, risking dysentery rather than die of thirst. The radio crackles with intermittent updates from Omaha Beach. The news is mixed. American forces have established a tenuous beachhead, but are struggling to push inland against determined German resistance. The planned link-up with the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc has been delayed indefinitely. In his command bunker, Rudder faces a horrible decision. With ammunition nearly exhausted and no relief in sight, he must consider the possibility of surrender to save the lives of his wounded. "Options?" he asks his officers. Lieutenant Kirchner speaks first. "We've accomplished our primary mission. The guns are neutralized. We could try to break out after dark, make our way to Omaha Beach." Lieutenant Eichner shakes his head. "The wounded can't be moved that far, and we'd have to fight through German lines all the way." "What about evacuation by sea?" suggests Lieutenant Vermeer. "The way we came in." "The landing craft are gone," Rudder reminds him, "and the cliffs make it impossible to evacuate the wounded that way." The discussion is interrupted by the crack of nearby rifle fire. German infantry are probing the perimeter again, testing for weaknesses. "We hold," decides Rudder finally. "Request more naval fire support. Consolidate our positions. The 5th Rangers and the 29th Infantry will reach us eventually." It's the only decision a commander like Rudder could make, but it condemns his men to continued hardship with no guarantee of survival. At the forward position, Private First Class Lommel and his team repel another German probe. His Thompson submachine gun has jammed from the dust and constant use. He switches to his .45 caliber pistol, his last weapon with 8 rounds remaining. "Fall back to secondary positions," he orders as German fire intensifies. His men retreat in good order, leapfrogging from cover to cover while providing mutual supporting fire. But one Ranger is too slow. Private Walter Johnson takes a bullet through the throat as he rises to move. Blood sprays in a fine mist as he falls backward, his hands clutching at his ruined neck. The arterial bleeding is massive. He'll be dead in seconds. "Man down," calls Sergeant Kuhn, but there's nothing to be done. They can't even recover Johnson's body under the intense fire. In the aid station, another Ranger has died of his wounds, the man with the mangled leg that Private Fruehling had been tending. His passing is almost a mercy given his suffering. Medic Motley covers his face with a blood-stained blanket. "We need to move these men outside," says Motley. "The bunker's becoming a health hazard. The air in the enclosed space is nearly unbearable, a miasma of blood, excrement, sweat, and the distinctive sweet metallic smell of gangrene. Flies have found their way in, drawn by the scent of death. They crawl over wounds, laying eggs that will soon hatch into maggots." Fruehling helps organize a team to move the wounded to a depression behind the command bunker, where they'll have some protection from fire while getting fresh air. Each movement of a wounded man elicits screams or whimpers of pain. Some have lost so much blood they barely respond at all. As they work, German mortars begin falling again, the distinctive pop of launch followed seconds later by the explosion of impact. The rounds are walking closer to their position. "Incoming!" shouts Fruling. The Rangers scatter for cover, leaving wounded men exposed on their stretchers. Fruling throws himself over one such man as a mortar round impacts 30 yards away, sending deadly fragments in all directions. Something hot tears through his sleeve, slicing the skin of his forearm. When the barrage lifts, Fruling checks the man he protected. The Ranger is dead, not from the mortar, but from his previous wounds. Fruling has risked his life to shelter a corpse. The grim reality of their situation becomes clearer with each passing hour. They are running out of options, as surely as they're running out of ammunition, water, and medical supplies. 1,700 hours. The afternoon sun hangs low over the embattled point, casting long shadows across the cratered landscape. The German pressure has been relentless, probing attacks from multiple directions, sniper fire targeting any movement, mortar barrages falling at irregular intervals to keep the Rangers on edge. Colonel Rudder's force has been compressed into an area roughly 200 yards by 150 yards, a small fraction of the ground they initially secured. With each German attack, they've been forced to abandon positions, falling back to tighter defensive lines. Now there is nowhere left to retreat. "Ammunition report," Rudder asked Lieutenant Kirchner. Kirchner's face is gray with exhaustion and streaked with dirt. "Critical across the board. Most men are down to their last magazine or clip. BAR gunners averaging 40 rounds per weapon. Grenades nearly exhausted. The situation with the wounded is even worse. 3 more have died in the past hour. The rest lie in improvised shelters, their conditions deteriorating without proper medical care. Medic Motley has done all he can with the limited supplies available. Now he simply moves among the wounded, offering water and comforting words to ease their passing. Private Herbert Epstein has abandoned the MG-42 position after running out of ammunition. Now he's paired with Private Fruling in a bomb crater near the eastern edge of the perimeter. Both men are down to their sidearms, Epstein with a .45 caliber M1911 pistol, Fruling with a captured German Luger. 6 rounds, says Epstein, checking his pistol. How about you? Fruling ejects the Luger's magazine. 4, plus whatever's in the chamber. They share a look that needs no explanation. If the Germans launch a determined assault, they won't have enough ammunition to repel it. Save the last one, says Epstein quietly. Fruling nods, understanding the implication. Neither of them wants to be taken prisoner. Across the perimeter, similar scenes play out as Rangers prepare for what might be their final stand. Some write last letters to family members on scraps of paper, knowing they'll probably never be delivered. Others check and recheck their weapons, counting individual bullets. A few pray quietly, fingering rosaries or reciting Hebrew prayers. In the command bunker, the radio crackles to life. Lieutenant Eichner listens intently, then turns to Rudder with the first smile seen on the point in hours. "Sir, the 5th Rangers have broken through from Omaha. They're pushing toward our position from the southeast." This news electrifies the command group. The 5th Ranger Battalion, 400 fresh troops with ammunition and supplies, could turn the tide. "How far out?" asks Rudder. Eichner's smile fades slightly. "Approximately 2 miles, sir. They're encountering heavy resistance near Grand Camp." 2 miles might as well be 200, given the German forces between them and potential rescue. But it's the first hope they've had since securing the point. Rudder makes a decision. "Radio Colonel Schneider. Tell him we'll attempt a breakout to the southeast to link up with his forces. Coordinate naval gunfire to suppress German positions along the route." The plan is desperate, but represents their best chance for survival. By advancing toward their rescuers, they might break the German encirclement. The order spreads quickly among the Rangers. Despite their exhaustion and dwindling ammunition, the news of potential relief energizes them. Men check weapons one final time, share the last of their water, prepare to move out. Private First Class Lomel will lead one of the assault teams. He gathers his remaining men, 7 Rangers, all that's left of his original squad of 20. "We move in 5 minutes. Fix bayonets. Once we start, we don't stop for anything or anyone. Our only chance is speed and surprise. The men nod grimly, affixing bayonets to their rifles. Those without rifles draw combat knives or fashion clubs from broken equipment. This will be close-quarters combat, visceral, brutal, and final. Colonel Rudder makes his way through the positions, speaking briefly with each group. His uniform is torn and blood-stained, his voice hoarse from shouting orders over the din of battle. But his presence steadies the men. Rangers, you've accomplished the impossible today. You've scaled these cliffs under fire, neutralized the guns that threatened our invasion forces, and held against overwhelming odds. Now we do the impossible one more time. We break out, link up with our forces, and go home. The sun touches the horizon. In the fading light, the Rangers prepare for their desperate gambit. 1800 hours. The breakout begins with a furious barrage from the USS Satterley offshore. 5-inch shells scream overhead to impact along the likely German defensive positions to the southeast. The explosions walk across the Norman landscape, tearing apart hedgerows, collapsing farm buildings, creating momentary chaos among the German forces. Under the cover of this barrage, Colonel Rudder's Rangers begin their movement. The formation is simple but effective. The most combat-capable men form a rough arrowhead, with the wounded in the center and a rear guard to protect against pursuit. Every man who can walk does so. Those too badly wounded to move are left behind with volunteer medics and enough ammunition for mercy if the Germans should overrun the position. Private First Class Lamel leads his team through the initial German lines. The naval barrage has done its work. The first trench system is occupied only by dead and stunned German soldiers. They push through quickly, bayonets fixed, using grenades sparingly to clear bunkers and strongpoints. The Germans, however, quickly recover from the shock of the barrage. Machine gun fire erupts from concealed positions in the hedgerows. Mortar rounds begin falling among the advancing Rangers. The carefully organized formation begins to fragment as men seek cover or fall wounded. Private Fruehling and Private Epstein find themselves pinned down behind a stone wall by fire from an MG-42 position 100 yards to their front. The deadly German machine gun sweeps the area, bullets chipping stone fragments from their cover. "We need to flank it," says Epstein. "I'll go left, you go right. On 3. Fruehling nods, gripping his captured Luger. 1, 2, 3. They break cover simultaneously, sprinting in opposite directions to split the machine gunner's attention. Epstein is faster, drawing the majority of fire. Bullets kick up dirt around his feet as he zigzags toward a drainage ditch that will give him cover for approach. Fruehling makes it to a hedgerow 30 yards to the right of their original position. From here, he has a better angle on the German gun nest. He takes careful aim with the Luger and fires twice. One round finds its mark. The assistant gunner jerks backward, clutching his chest. The MG-42 swings toward Fruehling's position. He dives for cover as bullets tear through the hedgerow, sending leaves and branches flying around him. One bullet grazes his shoulder, leaving a burning furrow across his flesh. He bites back a scream, knowing any sound would further pinpoint his position. Epstein has reached the drainage ditch. Crawling on his belly through stagnant water and mud, he approaches within 20 yards of the German position. The machine gun is still focused on Fruehling's position, unaware of the threat from the flank. Rising to a crouch, Epstein draws his combat knife and charges the last distance. The German gunner hears him too late, trying to swing the heavy weapon around. Epstein plunges his knife into the man's throat, feeling the hot gush of blood over his hand. A second German reaches for a Luger, but Epstein is faster, wrenching his knife free and slashing across the man's face. The machine gun position secured, Epstein signals to Fruehling. Together, they turn the captured MG-42 around, now facing toward the German lines. With a long belt of ammunition found in the position, they have significantly improved their firepower. Elsewhere, the breakout is meeting with mixed success. Colonel Rudder and his command group have advanced nearly 400 yards from their starting position, but at heavy cost. Lieutenant Kirchner is down with a bullet through his thigh. Several of the walking wounded have collapsed from exhaustion or blood loss. Staff Sergeant Petty arrives at Rudder's position with grim news. "Sir, the Germans have cut off our rear elements. Major Lytle and about 20 men are isolated." Rudder faces another impossible decision. press forward toward potential rescue, or turn back to help the isolated rear guard. The mission demands moving forward, but no Ranger commander leaves men behind. "We'll hold position here," decides Rudder. "Send a team to link up with Lytle's group. The rest establish a defensive perimeter." The breakout has stalled less than half a mile from their starting point. As darkness begins to fall, the Rangers dig in once more, their situation hardly improved from before. The wounded moan softly. Ammunition remains critically low. German forces are regrouping all around them, and somewhere to the southeast, the 5th Rangers are fighting their own battle to reach their besieged comrades. 200 hours. Darkness has fallen completely over the battlefield. The Rangers have established a ragged perimeter in a cluster of farm buildings and adjacent hedgerows. The stone walls of the Norman farm provide better protection than the bomb craters of Pointe du Hoc, but their tactical situation remains dire. Colonel Rudder has set up his command post in what was once a kitchen. The farmhouse owners fled before the invasion, leaving behind personal belongings that create an eerie domesticity amid war. Family photographs on the mantel, a half-knitted sweater on a chair, children's toys scattered across the floor. "Status report," Rudder asked Lieutenant Eichner. "We've consolidated as best we can. Approximately 65 combat-effective men remaining. Major Lytle's group rejoined our position 30 minutes ago, though they took additional casualties doing so. The wounded are in the barn. 28 men, 7 critical. Ammunition? Still critical. Maybe 20 to 30 rounds per man. We recovered some German weapons during the breakout, which helps." Rudder nods grimly. "Any contact with the 5th Rangers?" "Intermittent radio contact. They're approximately 1 mile south-southeast of our position, heavily engaged with elements of the 726th Grenadier Regiment. They're trying to reach us, but making slow progress." Outside, the sound of scattered firing continues, Rangers engaging German infiltrators trying to probe the perimeter. Flares occasionally illuminate the landscape, casting harsh shadows that play tricks on tired eyes. In the barn, converted to a field hospital, Medic Motley continues his grim work. The wounded lie on hay-covered floor, their bandages now filthy and soaked through with blood and exudate. Infection has set in for many. The air is thick with the smell of gangrene, urine, and feces. Private Fruling, his shoulder wound hastily bandaged, helps distribute water found in a farm well. The liquid is cloudy and tastes of minerals, but it's wet. He kneels beside a Ranger whose lower jaw has been shot away, carefully dripping water into the corner of the man's mouth, where it can trickle down his throat without choking him. "How's he doing?" asks Epstein, entering the barn with an armload of clothing taken from farmhouse drawers. Makeshift bandages. "Not good," replies Fruling quietly. Motley says he won't last the night. Epstein nods, having seen too much death today to be shocked. "We salvaged some more ammunition. Rudder's having it distributed. Not much, but better than nothing." The conversation is interrupted by the distinctive sound of tracked vehicles, German armor moving in the darkness. Both men tense, listening as the sounds grow closer. Outside, Rangers in defensive positions recognize the threat immediately. German armor, likely Panzer IVs or Stug assault guns, would be devastating to their lightly armed force. Staff Sergeant Petty, now commanding one of the defensive sectors after Lieutenant Kirchner's wounding, rallies his men. "Anyone with explosives, front and center. Everyone else, prepare to engage infantry when they hit our lines." Private First Class Lomel is one of 3 men who step forward with explosives. In his case, 2 satchel charges salvaged during the breakout. Each canvas bag contains 10 pounds of Composition B explosive, enough to disable a tank if placed correctly. "We'll set up an ambush at the road junction," orders Petty, indicating a spot where the farm lane meets a wider road. "Lomel, you're in charge. Don't waste those charges, make them count." Lomel takes his small team forward, moving stealthily through the darkness. The sound of German armor is louder now, at least 2 vehicles, possibly more, accompanied by infantry based on the occasional shouts in German and the sound of hobnailed boots on pavement. The 3 Rangers reach the road junction and quickly improvise an ambush. Lomel will take the lead vehicle with his satchel charges. The others will engage supporting infantry with grenades and their few remaining rounds. They don't wait long. Within minutes, the distinctive silhouette of a German Stug 3 assault gun appears, moving slowly with infantry walking alongside for protection. The vehicle's engine growls in the darkness, tracks clanking against the road surface. Lommel waits until the Stug is directly at the junction, then sprints from cover. The German infantry spot him and shout warnings, raising their rifles. Bullets snap past as Lommel reaches the side of the assault gun. With practiced motion, he slaps the magnetic clamp of the satchel charge against the thin side armor, just above the tracks, and pulls the igniter cord. "Fire in the hole!" he shouts, diving away from the vehicle. The explosion is massive, 10 pounds of composition B detonating against the armor. The blast lifts the 15-ton vehicle partially off the ground, rupturing the side armor and igniting ammunition stored inside. Secondary explosions follow as the Stug's ammunition cooks off. German infantry are caught in the blast, bodies thrown like rag dolls. In the confusion, Lommel's team engages the surviving infantry with grenades and rifle fire. The Germans, disoriented by the destruction of their armored support, fall back in disorder. The Rangers have won this small engagement, but the sound of more vehicles can be heard in the distance. The Germans are bringing up reinforcements. Each small victory only delays the inevitable, unless relief arrives soon. 2200 hours. The German attacks have intensified under cover of darkness. No longer able to call in naval gunfire support due to the danger of friendly fire in the darkness, the Rangers must rely on their dwindling ammunition and tactical skill to hold their perimeter. Colonel Rudder moves from position to position, encouraging his men, directing fire where the German pressure is greatest. The farmhouse that serves as his command post has taken several direct hits from German mortars, collapsing portions of the roof and walls. Private Fruehling has returned to the fighting line after helping with the wounded. Positioned in what was once a garden shed, he and 3 other Rangers defend an approach through an orchard that leads directly to the barn where the wounded are sheltered. German infiltration teams have been probing this sector for the past hour, using the apple trees for cover. The distinctive sound of MP-40 submachine guns answers the Rangers' rifle fire. Muzzle flashes briefly illuminate the darkness, revealing fleeting glimpses of moving figures. "They're flanking left," warns Sergeant Jack Kuhn, who commands this position. Fruehling swings his M1 Garand in that direction, peers through the darkness. He catches movement. A German soldier darting between trees 30 yards out. He leads the target slightly, squeezes the trigger. The rifle bucks against his shoulder. The German falls. "Good shot," says Kuhn. Fruehling doesn't respond. He's counting rounds in his head, 5 remaining in the unblocked clip. After that, he has 2 rounds in his captured Luger, and then only his combat knife. On the opposite side of the perimeter, Private Herbert Epstein mans a listening post with Private First Class Leonard Lommel. Their position is 20 yards outside the main defensive line, an isolation that leaves them vulnerable but provides early warning of German movements. They lie silently in a shallow drainage ditch, straining to hear over the distant sounds of fighting. The ground is cold and damp beneath them, soaking through their uniforms. Neither man has slept in nearly 40 hours. They fight against exhaustion, knowing that to fall asleep would mean death, for themselves and potentially their comrades. Epstein touches Lommel's arm, points to their right front. Lommel nods. He hears it too. Soft footfalls, the quiet jingle of equipment, whispered German. A patrol is moving past their position, heading toward the main Ranger line. They wait until the Germans are past, then rise to engage from behind. Lommel with his Thompson, Epstein with a captured carabiner 98K rifle. At this range, less than 20 yards, they can't miss. The Germans never know what hit them. 4 bodies crumple to the ground. A 5th, wounded, tries to crawl away. Epstein finishes him with a single shot to the head. The sound of their ambush is masked by the general firing along the perimeter. Quickly, they search the dead Germans for ammunition and usable weapons. This grim scavenging has become routine, the only way to sustain their defense. Lommel finds 2 potato masher grenades and additional magazines for an MP-40. Epstein recovers ammunition for his carabiner and a Luger pistol with a full magazine. "We should fall back to the main line," whispers Lomel. "They'll send more when these don't return." They retreat carefully, using the drainage ditch for cover. When they reach the Ranger perimeter, they're challenged by a sentry. "Flash," comes the whispered challenge. "Thunder," Lomel responds with the correct password. They slip through the lines to report to Colonel Rudder. Their information about German patrol patterns could be valuable in anticipating the next major assault. In the barn, the situation with the wounded has reached crisis point. 3 more Rangers have died in the past hour. The others lie in agony, some delirious with fever and infection. Medic Eugene Motley has given the last of the morphine to those in greatest pain. Now he can offer nothing but empty reassurances. "Hang on. Help is coming. Just a little longer." He doesn't believe it himself anymore. The rescue force seems no closer than hours ago. With each passing minute, more wounded slip away. He's watched too many good men die today. Men he trained with, drank with, played cards with in England while preparing for this invasion. Their faces, now pale and waxy in death, will haunt him if he survives this night. In his command post, Colonel Rudder confers with his remaining officers. The radio crackles with intermittent updates from the 5th Ranger Battalion. They're still fighting to break through, but German resistance is stiffening. The prospects of immediate relief are fading. "Options," says Rudder simply. Lieutenant Eichner speaks first. "We can't hold this position through the night, sir. Not with our ammunition situation." "Agreed," says Lieutenant Vermeer, "but we can't move the wounded either." The implication hangs in the air, unspoken, but understood. They might need to leave the wounded behind to save those still capable of fighting. Rudder's face reveals nothing of his inner turmoil. No Ranger commander has ever abandoned his wounded. But no Ranger force has ever faced quite this situation either. "We hold until midnight," he decides finally. "If no relief by then, we'll reassess." His officers nod grimly. They know what reassess means. Impossible choices in an impossible situation. Outside, German probing attacks continue along the perimeter. The Rangers respond with disciplined fire, making every precious round count. But their line grows thinner with each casualty, their ammunition scarcer with each engagement. The night is far from over. 23:30 hours. The German attacks have intensified to near constant pressure along all sides of the Ranger perimeter. Colonel Rudder's force is now compressed into an area roughly 100 yards square, the farmhouse, barn, and immediately adjacent hedgerows. Their ammunition is nearly exhausted. Many men are down to their last few rounds, save for final defense or to avoid capture. Private Herbert Epstein crouches in the remains of a stone wall that once marked the farm's boundary. Next to him, Staff Sergeant William Petty scans the darkness with a pair of captured German binoculars. "Movement, 3 o'clock, about 50 yards, whispers Petty. Epstein shifts his position slightly, peering through the broken stones. In the intermittent light of flares, he can make out figures moving in tactical formation. German infantry preparing for another assault. "I count at least a platoon's strength," says Epstein. "Maybe 40 men. Petty nods grimly. "We've got 8 men on this sector, 2 BARs but only about 50 rounds between them. Everyone else is down to their sidearms or rifles with a handful of rounds." The math is simple and devastating. They cannot repel a determined assault by superior numbers. "Should we pull back to the farmhouse?" asks Epstein. Petty considers this. The farmhouse is the center of the Ranger defense, the last redoubt if the perimeter is breached. But abandoning this position would expose the barn where the wounded are housed. "We hold as long as we can," decides Petty. "Make them pay for every inch." Epstein nods, then distributes what little ammunition they have among the 8 defenders. Each man gets perhaps 5 to 10 rounds, enough for one brief firefight, no more. On the opposite side of the perimeter, Private First Class Lomel and Private Fruling defend a sector facing a sunken lane that approaches the farm from the east. This natural trench provides perfect cover for attacking forces, a fact the Germans have exploited repeatedly throughout the night. "They're massing again," says Lomel, indicating movement at the far end of the lane, just visible in the moonlight. Looks like they're bringing up flamethrowers. Fruling feels a chill that has nothing to do with the night air. The Flammenwerfer 41, the German flamethrower, is a terror weapon of the worst kind. Its burning fuel sticks to clothing and skin, burning at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Death by flamethrower is perhaps the most horrible fate on the battlefield. What do we have to stop them? Asks Fruling. Lommel takes inventory. 2 grenades, 17 rounds for the Thompson. Your Garand is empty, right? Fruling nods. He has only his captured Luger with 2 rounds remaining. We need to stop the flamethrower before it gets in range, says Lommel. Those things are only good for about 25-30 yards. If we can hit them at 40 yards, we have a chance. The plan is simple by necessity. Lommel will use his Thompson to target the flamethrower operator when the Germans advance. Fruling will use the grenades to disrupt any supporting infantry. It's a desperate gambit with minimal ammunition, but they have no choice. They don't wait long. The German assault begins with a barrage of potato masher grenades lobbed toward the Ranger positions. Most fall short, exploding in the open ground between the sunken lane and the defensive line. But 2 land close enough to shower Lommel and Fruling with dirt and fragments. Then the Germans advance, a group of about 15 soldiers moving in fire teams, providing covering fire for each other as they rush forward in short bounds. In the center of their formation, recognizable by the distinctive tanks on his back, is the flamethrower operator. Lommel waits until they're within 40 yards. The flamethrower team is just preparing to bring their weapon to bear. He sights carefully on the operator, squeezes the trigger of his Thompson. A 3-round burst, all he can risk given his limited ammunition. 2 rounds strike the German in the chest. He stumbles but doesn't fall. The 3rd round hits something vital on the flamethrower apparatus. What happens next is both horrific and militarily fortunate for the Rangers. The pressurized fuel tank ruptures, spraying burning liquid over the operator and nearby soldiers. Men become living torches, their screams terrible in the darkness as they thrash and roll on the ground in futile attempts to extinguish the flames. The fuel burns through clothing, then skin, then muscle, reaching bone in seconds. Fruling uses the distraction to good effect, throwing both grenades at the remaining Germans who haven't been caught in the flamethrower malfunction. The explosions catch them in the open, dropping several more. The assault on this sector falters as the Germans pull back, dragging their wounded. But from the sounds around the perimeter, other sectors aren't faring as well. The volume of fire from Ranger positions is diminishing, a sign of dwindling ammunition. German fire, by contrast, remains consistent and heavy. In the command post, Colonel Rudder receives increasingly desperate reports from his sector commanders. Staff Sergeant Petty's position is about to be overrun. The western approach, defended by Lieutenant Eichner's team, has been reduced to 3 combat-effective men. Only the sector defended by Lommel and Fruling is holding relatively well. The radio crackles with a transmission from the 5th Ranger Battalion. Rudder listens intently, hope flaring briefly, then dying as he absorbs the message. The relief force has been stopped cold by a German counterattack. They're digging in, unable to advance further tonight. Rudder faces the moment he's been dreading. His force cannot hold until morning. The wounded cannot be moved. His men are out of ammunition, out of options, out of time. As he considers the unthinkable, surrender, a new sound reaches his ears. From somewhere to the southeast, the distinctive chatter of American .30 caliber machine guns, followed by the deeper thump of Sherman tank main guns. "Sir," calls Lieutenant Eichner from the radio. "New transmission from Omaha Beach. Elements of the 29th Infantry Division have broken through at Vierville. They're pushing inland toward our position." For the first time in many hours, Rudder allows himself a small smile. "Tell the men to hold. Relief is coming." Whether that relief will arrive in time remains to be seen. The German attacks continue with undiminished fury. The night is far from over, and dawn still hours away. 0100 hours, June 7, 1944. The longest night of the Rangers' lives continues. The sounds of battle from the southeast have grown louder. Clear evidence that American forces are fighting their way toward Pointe du Hoc. But the German pressure on the Rangers' perimeter has also intensified. as if the enemy senses this is their last chance to eliminate the American force before reinforcement arrives. Colonel Rudder has ordered all remaining ammunition consolidated and distributed to the most critical defensive positions. Men with empty weapons have been assigned as ammunition runners, medics, or given German weapons recovered from the battlefield. Some have only knives or entrenching tools, close-quarters weapons of last resort. Private Herbert Epstein's position has been overrun. Of the 8 men who defended that sector of Stonewall, only Epstein and Staff Sergeant Petty have made it back to the farmhouse. The others are either dead or missing, their fates unknown in the chaos of night fighting. They hit us with at least 50 men, Petty reports to Rudder, his voice hoarse from shouting orders over gunfire. We held as long as we could, but we were down to bayonets at the end. Epstein's uniform is torn and bloodied, not all of it his own blood. His face bears the vacant 1,000-yard stare of a man who has seen and done things beyond normal human experience. Epstein took down 3 with his knife, continues Petty, hand to hand, never seen anything like it. Rudder nods acknowledgement. The young Jewish soldier from Brooklyn has proven himself many times over today. If they survive, Epstein will be recommended for the Silver Star at minimum. Get yourselves some water, orders Rudder. Then reinforce Lammel's position. The Germans will probe there next. On the eastern perimeter, Private First Class Lammel and Private Fruhling continue their defense of the sunken lane approach. Their successful repulse of the flamethrower attack has bought them a temporary respite, but both men know it won't last. Listen, says Fruhling suddenly. Lammel cocks his head. Through the general din of battle, he hears what Fruhling has noticed. The rumble of heavy vehicles approaching from the sunken lane. Not the high-pitched whine of German panzer engines, but the deeper, throatier sound of American Sherman tanks. Is that? Begins Fruhling, hope rising in his voice. Could be, says Lammel cautiously. Or it could be captured American equipment. The Germans have been known to use captured tanks. They peer intently into the darkness. Flares illuminate the battlefield intermittently, casting sharp shadows that distort perception. In one such flash of light, they catch a glimpse of movement at the far end of the lane, the distinctive silhouette of an M4 Sherman tank, followed by what appear to be American infantrymen. Hold your fire, Lammel shouts to the Rangers around him. Then, taking an enormous risk, he stands and calls out the challenge. Flash! There's a pause that seems to stretch for eternity. Then comes the response. Thunder! The correct countersign. These are American forces. Rangers, calls Lammel. 2nd Battalion, Dog Company. 5th Rangers, Able Company, comes the reply. Coming in. The relief is indescribable. After 18 hours of continuous combat, after being isolated and nearly overrun, rescue has arrived. Lammel feels his knees go weak. Beside him, Fruhling actually sits down, his rifle clattering to the ground as the tension that has sustained him suddenly releases. Word spreads rapidly through the Ranger positions. Men weep openly. Some laugh with the slightly hysterical edge of those who have stared death in the face and somehow survived. Others remain grimly focused on their sectors, unwilling to believe the ordeal is truly over until they see American forces with their own eyes. The first elements of the relief force reach Lammel's position, a squad of Rangers from the 5th Battalion, led by Lieutenant Charles Parker. Behind them, Sherman tanks from the 743rd Tank Battalion provide heavy firepower. "You boys look like hell," says Parker, taking in the filthy, bloodied appearance of the 2nd Rangers. "You're the prettiest thing I've seen all day," responds Lammel with a weary grin. The relief force pushes through to the farmhouse, linking up with Colonel Rudder. Their arrival decisively shifts the balance of power. German attacks along the perimeter falter and then cease entirely, as enemy forces withdraw rather than face fresh American troops supported by armor. In the command post, Rudder confers with the commanders of the relief force. The news is mixed. The landing at Omaha Beach was a near disaster. The first wave suffered casualties approaching 90% before a foothold could be established. Even now, the beachhead is tenuous, with German forces counterattacking at several points. But the overall invasion is proceeding. Utah Beach was secured with relatively light casualties. British and Canadian forces have established beachheads at Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. The great gamble of Operation Overlord appears to be succeeding, despite the heavy cost. For the men of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, however, statistics and strategic objectives have little meaning at this moment. Their world has contracted to the most basic elements. They are alive when they expected to die. They have held their position against overwhelming odds. They have not broken. As medics from the relief force begin treating the wounded and organizing evacuation, the Rangers who can still stand assemble near the farmhouse. Colonel Rudder, his uniform torn and blood-stained, addresses them briefly. Rangers, you have performed beyond any reasonable expectation today. You scaled those cliffs, destroyed those guns, and held this position when no one could have expected it. The lives you saved through your actions will never be counted, but they number in the thousands. The men listen in exhausted silence. Many sway on their feet, kept upright only by pride and the ingrained discipline of soldiers. Get some rest, concludes Rudder. You've earned it. As the Rangers disperse to assist with wounded evacuation or to finally collapse in whatever shelter they can find, Private Fruehling approaches Private Herbert Epstein, who sits alone on a broken wall, staring into the darkness. "We made it," says Fruehling, settling beside him. Epstein doesn't respond immediately. When he does, his voice is distant, as if coming from somewhere else entirely. "Did we? I'm not sure I'll ever leave this place." Fruehling understands. Though they may physically depart Pointe du Hoc, part of them will remain forever on these blood-soaked Norman cliffs and fields. What they have experienced in the past 18 hours has marked them in ways that may never heal. "At least we're alive to find out," says Fruehling finally. Epstein nods slowly. "At least there's that." Around them, the sounds of battle continue to recede as German forces withdraw to regroup. Dawn is still hours away, but for the Rangers of the 2nd Battalion, the longest night of their lives is finally approaching its end. 6 o'clock hours, June 7, 1944. Dawn breaks over the Norman countryside, revealing the full extent of the battlefield around Pointe du Hoc. What was once productive farmland has been transformed into a landscape that resembles the surface of the moon. Cratered, torn, lifeless. Bodies lie where they fell, American and German alike, sometimes intertwined in the final embrace of hand-to-hand combat. The Rangers who survived the night emerge from whatever shelter they found. Bomb craters, shell holes, damaged buildings, squinting in the early morning light. Their faces are almost unrecognizable beneath layers of dirt, blood, and the peculiar aged look that comes from constant fear and exertion. Some have not slept in over 48 hours. Others managed brief snatches of unconsciousness that barely qualify as rest. Colonel Rudder, having coordinated with the commanders of the relief force through the night, calls for an assembly to take stock of his battalion's condition. The Rangers gather near the farmhouse, moving slowly, bodies stiff from cold and wounds and the accumulated trauma of combat. Lieutenant Eichner, acting as adjutant, calls the roll. The responses are sparse. Of the original 225 men who began the assault on Pointe du Hoc, only 90 remain capable of standing in formation. And of those, perhaps half have injuries of some kind. Bandaged wounds, makeshift slings, limps and blood-stained uniforms. "D Company," calls Eichner. Lieutenant George Kirchner, his leg heavily bandaged where a bullet passed through the thigh, responds. 23 men present, sir, 9 walking wounded." "E Company," Lieutenant Vermeer answers. 31 men present, sir, 14 wounded. "F Company," Staff Sergeant Petty responds, having assumed command after the company's officers were killed or wounded. 18 men present, sir, 12 wounded. "Headquarters Company," 14 men present, sir, 6 wounded. The numbers are devastating. Less than half of the original force remains, and many of those are injured. The missing are a combination of confirmed dead, presumed dead, or isolated in small groups across the battlefield. As the roll call continues, medics from the relief force work to evacuate the seriously wounded. Stretcher teams carry men to waiting jeeps and ambulances that will transport them back to the beachhead for evacuation to hospital ships offshore. The critical cases go first. Men with penetrating chest or abdominal wounds, traumatic amputations, severe head injuries. Private First Class Leonard Lomel sits on an ammunition crate, watching the evacuation. His Thompson submachine gun rests across his knees. He has not yet been able to set it down, as if some part of him believes the battle might resume at any moment. A medic approaches to check the shrapnel wounds in his side that he's been ignoring for the past 12 hours. "You need to get those cleaned," says the medic, examining the crude field dressing Lomel applied himself. There's metal fragments still in there. Lomel nods but makes no move to follow the medic to the aid station. His eyes scan the horizon continuously, watching for threats that are no longer there. Nearby, Private Fruling helps load wounded onto a stretcher jeep. The man with the mangled leg that he watched die the previous day is among the bodies being collected for burial. The corpse is already showing signs of decomposition, accelerated by the summer heat. The skin has a greenish tinge, and the smell is distinctive and terrible. "Over here!" calls a voice from the direction of the barn. "We've got a live one!" Fruling and several others rush to the scene. A ranger presumed dead the previous day has been found alive, though barely. Private Walter Sefton had been shot through the lung during the initial assault on the cliffs. Somehow, he had crawled into a drainage culvert beneath the barn where he remained unconscious for nearly 24 hours. His condition is critical. The chest wound has collapsed his right lung, and infection has set in. But he's alive. Another small miracle in a day that has seen too few of them. As stretcher bearers rush Sefton to an ambulance, Colonel Rudder completes his assessment of the battalion. The Rangers have suffered approximately 135 casualties, 60% of their original strength. 47 men are confirmed dead, with another 23 missing and presumed dead. The wounded number 65, of whom at least 20 may not survive their injuries. Yet despite these losses, the mission must be counted a success. The guns of Pointe du Hoc, which could have devastated the landing forces at Utah and Omaha beaches, were neutralized. The German defensive line was penetrated at a critical point, creating confusion in their command structure. Thousands of American lives were potentially saved by the Rangers' actions. Rudder calls his remaining officers together for a briefing. The 5th Ranger Battalion and elements of the 29th Infantry Division have established a defensive perimeter around Pointe du Hoc, allowing the 2nd Rangers to be withdrawn for rest and reconstitution. But there will be little time for recovery. The battle for Normandy has only begun. "We'll move back to the assembly area near Vierville within the hour," Rudder informs them. "Get your men ready to march. Walking wounded will go by jeep if transportation is available." As the officers disperse to prepare their depleted companies, Rudder remains for a moment, looking back toward the cliffs where the assault began. From this distance, Pointe du Hoc looks almost peaceful, a rocky promontory jutting into the English Channel. Only the shattered concrete of the German gun emplacements and the cratered landscape bear witness to the violence that erupted there. 10 hours, June 7, 1944. The surviving Rangers of the 2nd Battalion have been withdrawn to a temporary assembly area near the village of Vierville-sur-Mer, approximately 2 miles inland from Omaha Beach. The area is still within range of occasional German artillery fire, but compared to the hell of Pointe du Hoc, it seems almost like a rest camp. Private Herbert Epstein sits on his helmet, back against a stone wall, eyes closed but not sleeping. The images behind his eyelids are worse than anything in the waking world. German faces contorted in death, the feel of his knife sliding between ribs, the hot spray of arterial blood across his hands and face. Staff Sergeant William Elrod Petty approaches, offering a canteen. "Drink, that's an order." Epstein takes the canteen mechanically, sips the metallic-tasting water. His hands shake slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion and the beginning stages of what combat veterans call the trembles, the body's reaction to extended periods of extreme stress once the immediate danger has passed. "How are you holding up?" asks Petty, though the question seems almost absurd in context. Epstein shrugs. "Still breathing." It's the standard Ranger response. Still breathing means still fighting, still in the game. But both men know that breathing is the least of it. They've seen Rangers who are technically alive but whose minds have departed. The thousand-yard stare, the uncontrollable shaking, the inability to function. Combat fatigue, shell shock, battle neurosis. The terms change with each war, but the condition remains the same. Colonel wants a debrief at 1100, says Petty. Just the key personnel who were involved with finding and destroying the guns. Epstein nods. Though he wasn't part of Lomel's team that found the guns, he'll likely be called to testify about the action at some point. Every detail of the mission will be analyzed, documented, learned from. Across the assembly area, Private First Class Lomel sits alone, field stripping and cleaning his Thompson submachine gun. Though ammunition is now plentiful, thanks to the supply lines established from the beachhead, the habit of weapons maintenance is ingrained too deeply to ignore, even in exhaustion. Private Fruling approaches, carrying 2 tin cups of something hot. "Coffee," he says, offering one to Lomel. "Real coffee, not that instant powder stuff." Lomel accepts the cup gratefully. The liquid is bitter and strong, but the warmth and caffeine are welcome. "Where'd you get this?" "Navy Beachmaster had a stash. Figured we raided it after yesterday." They drink in silence for a moment, the simple pleasure of hot coffee momentarily overshadowing the horrors they've experienced. Around them, other Rangers engage in similar small rituals of normalcy, shaving with cold water and broken mirrors, writing letters home on whatever scraps of paper can be found, smoking cigarettes passed hand to hand like precious currency. These activities are more than just routine. They are lifelines to sanity, reminders that a world exists beyond the blood and chaos of the battlefield, a world where hot coffee matters, where personal appearance counts for something, where loved ones wait for news. At 1100 hours, Colonel Rudder convenes his debriefing in a damaged but still standing farmhouse. The key participants in the Pointe du Hoc mission gather around a map table. Rudder himself, Staff Sergeant Petty, Lieutenant Eichner, Private First Class Lomel, Sergeant Jack Kuhn, and several others who played pivotal roles. "Let's get this on record while it's still fresh," begins Rudder. "Lomel, walk us through how you found those guns." Lomel describes the sequence of events, the discovery that the emplacements on the point were empty, the decision to push inland, following the cart tracks through the hedgerows, finding the guns hidden under camouflage netting in the apple orchard. "Distance from the point?" asks Rudder. "Approximately 500 to 600 yards inland, sir," responds Lomel, "southwest of the main position." "And the guns were intact, ready to fire?" "Yes, sir. They had ammunition nearby. Looked like they were being prepared to fire but weren't quite ready. The Germans seemed surprised by our arrival." Rudder nods, making notes. The intelligence failure, that the guns had been moved from their emplacements prior to the assault, nearly cost them the mission. Only the initiative of Rangers like Lomel and Kuhn saved it. The debriefing continues for over an hour, each participant adding details to the official record. The information gathered will be transmitted to higher headquarters, eventually making its way to General Omar Bradley and possibly even to General Eisenhower himself. What no one mentions, what doesn't make it into the official record, are the moments of sheer terror, the desperate hand-to-hand struggles in the dark, the sounds of men dying slowly from wounds that couldn't be treated. The official history will note casualties and objectives achieved. It will not capture the smell of burned flesh when the flamethrower malfunctioned, or the expression on a young German soldier's face when Epstein's knife found his throat. As the debriefing concludes, a jeep arrives with orders from division headquarters. Colonel Rudder steps outside to confer with the messenger, then returns with a grave expression. "We're moving out at 1400 hours, he announces. "The 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalions are being ordered to assault Grand Camp. Intelligence suggests it's held by elements of the 726th Grenadier Regiment, the same unit we faced at Pointe du Hoc." The news is met with stony silence. No one complains. No one questions. These are Rangers. They will do what is ordered, regardless of their exhaustion, regardless of their depleted numbers, regardless of the horrors they've already faced. "Get your men ready," Rudder tells his officers. "We move in 3 hours." As the group disperses, Private First Class Lomel finds himself walking alongside Staff Sergeant Petty. Think we'll make it through this one? Asks Lomel quietly. Petty considers the question seriously. He's not one for false optimism or empty reassurances. Some of us will, some won't. Same as yesterday, same as tomorrow. Lomel nods. It's the only honest answer. And in war, honesty is perhaps the only currency that still holds value. 1400 hours, June 7, 1944. The remnants of the 2nd Ranger Battalion form up for their march to Grand Camp. The men have been reorganized into 2 composite companies rather than the original 3, a necessary consolidation given their reduced numbers. What remains is the hard core of the battalion, those who survived the crucible of Pointe du Hoc, forged into something beyond ordinary soldiers. Colonel Rudder walks the line before they move out, studying each man. Some are bandaged but ambulatory. All show signs of the previous day's fighting. Torn uniforms, bloodstains, the hollow-eyed look of men who have seen too much. But their weapons are clean, their equipment as properly arranged as circumstances permit, and they stand at attention as he passes. "Rangers," Rudder addresses them, "I know what you've been through. I know you're tired, but there's still a job to do, and no one can do it better than you. The road to Berlin begins here, in Normandy, and we're going to help pave it." The speech is brief, direct, devoid of flowery patriotism or abstract concepts of glory. These men are beyond such motivations now. They fight for each other, for survival, for the simple desire to end the war and go home. The march to Grand Camp begins along dirt roads and farm tracks. The Rangers move in tactical formation, despite being in nominally friendly territory. Advance elements, main body, flank security, rear guard. German snipers and infiltrators are still active throughout the area, and artillery fire remains a constant threat. Private First Class Lomel, his side properly bandaged now by battalion medical personnel, walks with the lead element. His Thompson submachine gun is loaded with a fresh magazine, spare ammunition distributed among the pouches of his web gear. Though technically a sergeant in rank, he functions as a de facto platoon leader, given the shortage of officers. Private Herbert Epstein marches nearby. The young Jewish soldier from Brooklyn moves with a curious detachment, as if not fully present in his body. His eyes scan continuously for threats, his rifle held at the ready position despite being kilometers from the front line. The hypervigilance that kept him alive at Pointe du Hoc has become ingrained, impossible to switch off. The column passes through areas devastated by the pre-invasion bombing. Farmhouses lie in ruins. Fields are cratered and strewn with debris. Occasionally, they encounter French civilians emerging from cellars or improvised shelters. Old men, women, children, their faces showing the complex mix of fear, relief, and uncertainty that characterizes civilians caught in war zones. An elderly Frenchman approaches Colonel Rudder, speaking rapidly in French and gesturing toward the German lines. Lieutenant Eichner, who speaks passable French, translates. He says there's a German machine gun position in the church steeple at Grand Camp. It has clear fields of fire over all the approaching roads. Rudder nods, thanking the man. The information is consistent with their intelligence reports. Grand Camp, a small fishing village on the coast, has been fortified by the Germans as part of their Atlantic Wall defenses. The stone church with its commanding view makes an ideal observation and firing position. The battalion continues its advance, now moving more cautiously as they approach Grand Camp. 3 kilometers from the village, they halt and establish a temporary assembly area in a small copse of trees. Rudder calls his officers and senior NCOs together for a final briefing. Maps are spread on the hood of a jeep. Aerial reconnaissance photographs show the layout of Grand Camp. The church in the center, stone houses clustered around a small harbor. German defensive positions marked with red grease pencil. "The 5th Rangers will attack from the south," explains Rudder, tracing the route on the map. "We'll come in from the east along this road. There's a German strong point here, here, and here." He points to 3 positions. "Heavy machine guns, possibly mortars. We'll need to take them out before we can advance into the village proper." The plan is methodical, reflecting Rudder's background as a football coach. each element with a specific role, coordinated timing, exploitation of weaknesses in the opponent's line. The Rangers will attack just before sunset, using the glare of the western sun to blind the German observers in the church steeple. As the officers return to their units to brief the men, the sound of approaching aircraft draws everyone's attention skyward. A formation of P-47 Thunderbolts passes overhead, heading toward Grand Camp. Minutes later, the distinctive crump of bombs impacting reaches them, followed by columns of smoke rising from the village. "Air support," says Staff Sergeant Petty, watching the distant explosions. "That'll soften them up a bit." Private Fruling, standing nearby, isn't so sure. He's seen enough combat to know that bombing rarely eliminates defenders. It may destroy some positions, but it also creates rubble that provides excellent cover for determined infantrymen. The fight for Grand Camp will be house to house, room to room, the kind of close-quarters battle that negates American advantages in firepower and mobility. At 1900 hours, with the sun low in the western sky, the Rangers move out for the final approach to Grand Camp. They advance in small squads, using terrain features for cover, maintaining careful intervals to minimize the effects of artillery or mortar fire. The sound of combat grows louder as they near the village, the crack of small arms, the deeper thump of mortars, the distinctive sound of German MG-42 machine guns. The 5th Ranger Battalion has already engaged from the south, drawing German attention and fire. The 2nd Battalion's approach from the east is meant to catch the defenders in a crossfire, dividing their attention and resources. The first German resistance comes as they approach the eastern outskirts. Sniper fire from a farmhouse 300 yards ahead. Bullets snap overhead or kick up dirt around the advancing Rangers. One man goes down, clutching his shoulder, but the column doesn't halt. Designated marksmen return fire, suppressing the snipers while the main body continues to advance. Private First Class Lamel leads his squad toward their first objective, a German bunker constructed from reinforced concrete and earth, housing what intelligence suggests is an 81mm mortar team. The position is well sighted, with clear fields of fire over the likely approaches. "Fruling, Epstein, with me," orders Lamel. "We'll flank it from the north. Johnson, take your team south. Suppress the firing port while we approach." The Rangers have done this many times before, in training, in North Africa, in Sicily, and most recently at Pointe du Hoc. The tactics of bunker assault are ingrained, practiced until they become instinctive. Suppress, approach, breach, clear. Each man knows his role without need for detailed instructions. Lomel's team works their way through a drainage ditch that provides cover for their approach. When they're within 50 yards of the bunker, Johnson's team opens fire from the opposite direction, pouring rounds into the bunker's firing port to keep the Germans' heads down. Under this covering fire, Lomel, Fruling, and Epstein sprint the final distance to the bunker's blind spot, the rear entrance designed for resupply and reinforcement. Epstein places a satchel charge against the door, while Lomel and Fruling provide security. The demolition is timed for a 10-second fuse, giving them just enough time to take cover. The explosion blasts the door inward, filling the bunker with dust, debris, and concussive force. Before the dust settles, the Rangers are through the breach, throwing grenades ahead of them, following immediately with Thompson's submachine gun fire. The interior of the bunker is a slaughterhouse. The 4-man German mortar team never had a chance to respond to the breach. Their bodies lie where they fell, torn by grenade fragments and .45 caliber rounds. Blood covers the walls and pools on the concrete floor. The air is thick with cordite, dust, and the metallic smell of fresh blood. "Clear!" calls Lomel after checking each corner of the bunker. He keys his radio. "Objective Alpha secured. 1 German strongpoint down. 2 more to go before they reach the center of Grand Camp." The sun continues to lower toward the horizon as the Rangers press their attack into the gathering darkness. 20:30 hours, June 7, 1944. Darkness has fallen over Grand Camp as the battle for the village intensifies. The Rangers of 2nd Battalion have secured the eastern approaches, eliminating 3 German strongpoints through a combination of small unit tactics, demolition charges, and sheer aggression. Now they push into the village itself, where the fighting becomes the intimate horror of urban combat. The streets of Grand Camp are narrow, many barely wide enough for a single vehicle. Stone buildings press close on either side, creating perfect ambush points and channeling attacking forces into kill zones covered by pre-sighted machine guns. The Germans have had 4 years to prepare these defenses, and they use them skillfully. Private First Class Lommel leads his squad down Rue de la Mer, moving in the Ranger combat methodology. 2 men advance while others cover, leapfrogging from doorway to doorway, checking each building before moving past. Progress is painfully slow but methodical. Rush, and you die. Private Herbert Epstein and Private Fruhling form one of the assault pairs. They approach a stone house with shuttered windows, a potential German position. Epstein covers while Fruhling tries the door. Locked. With practiced coordination, Epstein places a breaching charge, just enough explosive to shatter the lock without bringing down the entire structure. The door bursts inward. Fruhling goes low, Epstein high, both firing short bursts from their weapons as they enter. The interior is dark, illuminated only by their muzzle flashes and the glow of fires burning elsewhere in the village. The ground floor appears empty, civilian furniture overturned, personal belongings scattered in the hasty evacuation. "Clear," calls Fruhling, after checking the last corner, but as they prepare to move upstairs, a noise from the cellar freezes them in place. Someone, or something, is down there. Epstein signals the intention to check the cellar. Fruhling nods, covering the stairs with his rifle as Epstein approaches the cellar door. It takes all their discipline not to simply throw grenades down the stairs. Civilian casualties are to be avoided where possible, and French civilians might be sheltering below. Epstein opens the door cautiously, weapon ready. "U.S. Army," he calls down the dark stairwell. "Anyone down there, come out with hands up." There's a moment of silence, then a response in heavily accented English. "Don't shoot, we are French, civilians." "Come up slowly," orders Epstein, not lowering his weapon. "Hands where I can see them." 2 figures emerge from the darkness, an elderly man and woman, clearly terrified. Their clothes are disheveled, their faces gaunt from years of German occupation and rationing. The man speaks broken English, explaining that they hid when the fighting started, afraid of being caught in the crossfire. Fruhling, satisfied they aren't a threat, asks if there are German soldiers in nearby buildings. The old man nods vigorously, pointing toward the church in the center of town. Germans in church, machine gun in tower, many soldiers in square. This confirms what they already suspect. The church is the center of German resistance in Grand Camp. From its tower, machine gunners and observers can direct fire throughout the village. After instructing the civilians to remain in their cellar until the fighting passes, Epstein and Fruhling continue clearing the house, then signal to Lommel that this building is secured. The squad moves on to the next structure, repeating the process. House by house, street by street, the Rangers push toward the central square. Meanwhile, elements of the 5th Ranger Battalion have engaged from the south, creating a 2-pronged assault that divides German attention and resources. The sound of their firefight provides a constant backdrop. The chatter of machine guns, the crump of grenades, the occasional scream of a wounded man. As Lommel's squad approaches the central square, the resistance stiffens. German soldiers fire from prepared positions in buildings overlooking the approaches. An MG-42 opens up from a second-floor window, forcing the Rangers to dive for whatever cover they can find. The Hitler's buzzsaw fires at 1,200 rounds per minute, the individual shots blending into a continuous ripping sound. "Sniper team," calls Lommel over the radio. "We're pinned down on Rue de la Mer, 20 meters from the square. MG-42 in the building with the blue shutters, 2nd floor." The Ranger sniper team, positioned on the roof of a secured building, acknowledges. Seconds later, the distinctive crack of an M1C sniper rifle sounds. The machine gun falls silent momentarily, then resumes firing. They've hit the gunner, but a second German has taken his place. Another sniper round. Another momentary pause. A third shot, and the machine gun falls permanently silent. The sniper team has eliminated all its crew. "Moving," says Lommel, and his squad rushes forward during the window of opportunity. They reach an alley that provides better cover, then continue their advance toward the church. The central square of Grand Camp comes into view, an open space dominated by the stone church with its high tower. German soldiers have established defensive positions around the perimeter, using overturned carts, sandbags, and rubble as cover. The church itself has been fortified, its windows blocked except for narrow firing slits, its doors reinforced. Lommel assesses the situation. A frontal assault across the open square would be suicidal. They need to clear the buildings around the perimeter first, then approach the church from multiple directions simultaneously. He radios his assessment to Colonel Rudder, who concurs. The order goes out to all Ranger units. Secure the buildings overlooking the square, establish firing positions, and prepare for a coordinated assault on the church at 2200 hours. Private Herbert Epstein, Private Fruling, and 2 other Rangers are assigned to clear a 3-story building on the northeast corner of the square. The structure appears to be a former hotel or guest house, its facade now pockmarked by bullet holes and shrapnel. They approach from the rear, breaching a service entrance with minimal explosive to avoid alerting German observers. The interior is dark, requiring them to advance by feel and sound more than sight. They clear the ground floor room by room, finding no resistance. As they prepare to advance upstairs, the distinctive sound of German voices reaches them from above. Epstein signals the number, 3 or 4 men, speaking casually, unaware of the Americans below. The element of surprise is on their side. The Rangers move up the stairs with practiced stealth, avoiding the creaking treads, weapons ready. At the top, they pause, listening to pinpoint the Germans' location. They appear to be in a front room overlooking the square, likely an observation post reporting on American movements. Epstein signals the plan: a simultaneous breach, grenades first, then entry firing. The others nod understanding. On his 3 count, they move. The door splinters under a well-placed boot. 2 grenades sail through before the Germans can react. Dual explosions shake the building, followed immediately by the Rangers entering, weapons firing in disciplined bursts. 4 Germans die in seconds, their bodies thrown about the room by the grenades, riddled by follow-up fire. One manages to raise his MP-40 submachine gun, getting off a short burst before Epstein's Thompson cuts him down. The bullets go wide, impacting the ceiling and wall. "Clear," calls Epstein, checking the last corner. Fruling moves to the window overlooking the square, careful to stay to the side rather than silhouette himself. From this vantage point, he can see the church clearly, including the tower where German machine gunners have commanding fields of fire. "I count at least 20 Germans in defensive positions around the church," he reports. "Maybe more inside. Machine gun nest in the tower, another at the front entrance." Epstein joins him at the window. "We can provide supporting fire from here when the assault goes in. Good fields of fire over the entire eastern side of the square." They report their positions secured and their observations to Lommel, who relays the information to Colonel Rudder. Across the square, other Ranger teams are similarly securing buildings and establishing firing positions. The noose is tightening around the German garrison in the church. At 2200 hours precisely, the coordinated assault begins. From buildings surrounding the square, Rangers open fire with every weapon available. Rifles, BARs, captured German MG-42s, 60mm mortars. The volume of fire is overwhelming, keeping the German defenders pinned in place, unable to effectively return fire. Under this covering barrage, assault teams rush forward from multiple directions, crossing the open square in zigzag patterns to minimize their vulnerability. They carry satchel charges, Bangalore torpedoes, and other breaching equipment. Their objective is to reach the church, breach its defenses, and clear it room by room. From their position, Epstein and Fruling provide covering fire, their weapons joining the cacophony of the battle. They watch as Rangers are hit crossing the square, men falling, some lying still, others crawling toward whatever cover they can find. But for each who falls, 2 more continue forward. The momentum of the assault cannot be stopped. The first Rangers reach the church walls, flattening themselves against the stone to avoid fire from the tower above. Demolition experts place charges against the reinforced doors. Others prepare grenades and breaching equipment. The final assault is seconds away. 22:10 hours, June 7, 1944. The charges placed against the church doors detonate with a thunderous roar, sending splinters and metal fragments flying across the square. Before the dust settles, Ranger assault teams pour through the breaches, throwing grenades ahead of them to clear the immediate interior. From their vantage point in the building overlooking the square, Private Herbert Epstein and Private Fruehling continue providing covering fire, focusing on the church tower where German machine gunners still resist. The MG-42 in the tower has been firing continuously, its barrel likely glowing red from sustained use. But now its fire becomes sporadic, as the gunners realize the church itself has been breached. Inside the church, the scene is chaos and carnage. What was once a place of worship has been transformed into a fortress, its pews removed to create fields of fire, its altar used as a command post, its nave divided by sandbag barricades. The Rangers' entry grenades have done their work. The first defensive position is shattered, German bodies thrown about like broken dolls. But resistance stiffens immediately. From behind barricades and improvised strongpoints, German soldiers fire in disciplined bursts, forcing the Rangers to seek what little cover exists. The interior of the church becomes a swirling melee of muzzle flashes, grenade explosions, and shadowy figures moving in the smoke-filled darkness. Private First Class Lommel leads one of the assault teams, pushing up the central aisle of the church toward the altar area, where intelligence suggests the German commander has established his headquarters. His Thompson submachine gun chatters in controlled bursts, cutting down Germans who rise to fire from behind barricades. "Left flank! Left flank!" shouts Sergeant Jack Kuhn, spotting German reinforcements emerging from a side chapel. Lommel swings his Thompson in that direction, emptying the magazine into the advancing Germans. 5 fall in a heap, blocking the narrow doorway. He drops to one knee behind an overturned pew, reloading with practiced motions, even as bullets impact around him. The Rangers advance methodically, employing fire and movement tactics that have served them well since North Africa. 2-man teams leapfrog forward, one firing to suppress enemy positions while the other advances, then rolls reverse. It's slower than a straightforward rush, but it minimizes casualties in the face of determined resistance. Outside, Colonel Rudder receives updates by radio as the battle for the church unfolds. The situation in Grand Camp is fluid, but trending in the Rangers' favor. The 5th Battalion has secured the southern and western portions of the village. The 2nd Battalion controls the east. Only this church strongpoint and a few isolated pockets of resistance remain. A runner approaches Rudder with a message from division headquarters. He reads it quickly, then turns to Lieutenant Eichner. Division reports German counterattack forming up 3 kilometers west of here. Elements of the 352nd Infantry Division. ETA approximately 2 hours. This adds urgency to the operation. Grand Camp must be secured before German reinforcements arrive, or the Rangers risk being caught between the garrison and the relief force. "Tell all units to press the attack," orders Rudder. "We need Grand Camp secured within the hour." Inside the church, the Rangers are nearing the altar area where the most determined German resistance is centered. Lommel's team has suffered casualties, 2 men down with wounds, another killed by a grenade. But they continue to advance, driven by the knowledge that hesitation only prolongs the fight and increases the cost. "Covering fire," calls Lommel, preparing to rush the final barricade before the altar. Rangers positioned along the side aisles open fire, pouring rounds into the German position. Under this covering fire, Lommel and 3 others sprint forward, vaulting the sandbag barricade in a coordinated leap. They land among the defenders, the fighting now hand-to-hand in the confined space. Lommel's Thompson is empty from the covering burst. A German officer rises before him, Luger pistol leveled at his chest. Lommel throws the empty Thompson like a club, striking the officer's arm as the Luger fires. The bullet misses, impacting the church wall behind him. Before the officer can fire again, Lommel is on him, combat knife drawn. The struggle is brief and brutal. The knife finds the German's throat, opening the carotid artery in a spray of arterial blood that coats Lamel's face and uniform. The officer collapses, hands clutching futilely at his ruined neck, eyes wide with the knowledge of imminent death. Around him, similar struggles play out as Rangers grapple with the remaining defenders in the altar area. It's the most primitive form of combat. Knives, bayonets, rifle butts, fists, teeth. Men grunt and curse and scream as they kill and die in the shadow of the cross that still hangs above the altar, a silent witness to the savagery below. Then, suddenly, it's over. The last German defender falls, leaving only Rangers standing in the blood-soaked sanctuary. The silence is shocking after the continuous din of combat. "Clear the tower," orders Lomel, his voice hoarse from shouting over gunfire. "Make sure there are no stragglers." A team of Rangers moves toward the spiral staircase that leads to the church tower. They ascend cautiously, aware that cornered enemies are the most dangerous. At the top, they find the machine gun position that has caused so much havoc during the battle for Grand Camp. 4 German gunners lie dead at their weapon, killed by the accurate fire of Ranger snipers from buildings overlooking the square. From the tower, the Rangers have a commanding view of Grand Camp and the surrounding countryside. The village below is largely secured, with only isolated pockets of resistance still being mopped up by Ranger units. But to the west, a more concerning sight, the dust clouds and vehicle movements that indicate the approaching German counterattack. "Radio," calls the team leader, holding out his hand for the backpack radio set. "Colonel Rudder needs to see this." The radio man quickly establishes contact with the command post. "Tower team to Rudder. German reinforcements visible from our position. Multiple vehicles, infantry, estimated battalion strength or greater. Approximately 2 kilometers out and closing." Rudder's response is immediate. "Understood. Hold your position. Observe and report. All units, prepare for defensive operations." The battle for Grand Camp is won, but a greater challenge approaches. The Rangers, already exhausted from 2 days of continuous combat, must now prepare to defend their hard-won gains against fresh German troops. It's a familiar pattern. Take ground, hold ground, repeat until victory or death. In the nave of the church, Lomel organizes the remaining Rangers into defensive positions. The stone walls that sheltered German defenders will now serve the Americans in the same capacity. The captured MG-42 is repositioned to cover the western approach. Ammunition is redistributed, wounds hastily bandaged, water canteens passed among the parched fighters. Private Fruehling and Private Epstein join Lomel's group, having been ordered to reinforce the church position, now that their overwatch role is complete. "Status?" asks Lomel, noting their dirty, blood-spattered appearance. "Still breathing," responds Epstein, with the standard Ranger reply. "Heard the Germans are coming back for more." Lomel nods grimly. "They never learn. We'll give them the same welcome we gave these boys." He gestures to the German bodies scattered throughout the church. As darkness settles fully over Grand Camp, the Rangers prepare for yet another fight. They've been in combat almost continuously for nearly 40 hours. Exhaustion pulls at them like a physical weight. But they are Rangers, a fact that has become more than a unit designation. It's an identity forged in the crucible of Pointe du Hoc and tempered in the streets of Grand Camp. The Germans may come in force, but they will find no easy victory here. 23:30 hours, June 7, 1944. The German counterattack begins with an artillery barrage that falls across Grand Camp, the shells impacting with devastating effect among the tightly clustered stone buildings. The church, being the tallest structure and the center of American resistance, receives particular attention. High explosive rounds impact its walls and roof, sending stone fragments and centuries-old timbers crashing down. Inside the church, the Rangers take what shelter they can find. Private Fruehling and Private Epstein have positioned themselves behind the thick stone of the altar, which provides better protection than the thin walls of the nave. Around them, other Rangers hunker down as the building shakes with each near impact. "Like Pointe du Hoc all over again," shouts Fruehling over the din, his voice barely audible even though Epstein is less than 3 feet away. Epstein doesn't respond. His face has the blank expression that Fruehling has come to recognize, a kind of psychological shuddering that allows him to function under circumstances that would break most men. It's not courage exactly, but something beyond that, a complete dissociation from fear itself. The barrage continues for 20 minutes, standard German doctrine to soften up defenders before an infantry assault. When it finally lifts, the church is partially collapsed. The tower has taken a direct hit, its upper third now a pile of rubble in the square outside. Part of the roof is caved in, allowing moonlight to illuminate the dust-filled interior through gaping holes. But the thick stone walls, built to last centuries, have held. Colonel Rudder's voice crackles over the radio. All units prepare for infantry assault. Hold fire until targets are within effective range. Make every round count. The Rangers check weapons, adjust positions to account for the changed interior landscape, peer through windows and new holes in the walls for signs of the approaching German infantry. They don't wait long. Through the dust still hanging over Grand Camp come the dark figures of German grenadiers, infantry advancing in disciplined formation, using rubble and damaged buildings for cover. Behind them, the distinctive silhouettes of armored vehicles, SDKF Z-251 half-tracks, and what appears to be at least one Panzer IV tank. From his position in the church tower, or what remains of it, Staff Sergeant Petty observes the German advance through binoculars. He counts at least 2 companies of infantry, supported by 5 or 6 half-tracks and the tank. Against this, the Rangers in Grand Camp number fewer than 100 combat-effective men, many of them wounded to some degree. "Hold fire!" Petty orders the men positioned with him. "Let them get closer." The German infantry advances cautiously, clearly wary of ambush. They know the Rangers' reputation by now. The climb up Pointe du Hoc has already become the stuff of legend, even among enemy forces. The Germans take no chances, moving in combat teams, covering each other's advance, checking buildings methodically as they clear them. When the lead elements are approximately 150 yards from the church, Petty gives the order, "Fire!" From multiple positions throughout Grand Camp, the church, surrounding buildings, improvised strong points, the Rangers open fire simultaneously. The effect is devastating. German infantry caught in the open fall by the dozen. A hail of grenades rains down on those seeking cover near buildings. The half-tracks are targeted by Ranger bazooka teams, positioned specifically for this purpose. One half-track takes a direct hit from a bazooka round. Its thin armor penetrated easily. The vehicle erupts in flames, ammunition cooking off inside to create secondary explosions. German infantry riding on it are thrown clear, some already dead, others burning as the vehicle's fuel ignites. The tank, however, is a different matter. The Panzer IV, with its 75mm main gun and heavy armor, is largely immune to the Rangers' small arms. It continues to advance methodically, its main gun firing high-explosive rounds into identified Ranger positions, its coaxial machine guns sweeping the streets to pin down American fighters. Private First Class Lommel, observing from a position near the church entrance, recognizes the threat immediately. If the tank reaches the square, it can demolish the church and collapse the Rangers' entire defensive position. "Bazooka team to the front of the church, now!" he orders into his radio. The Ranger bazooka team, 2 men carrying the ungainly rocket launcher and its ammunition, move quickly through the interior of the church toward Lommel's position. They set up just inside the shattered main doors, where they have a clear line of sight to the approaching tank. "Wait until you have a flank shot," advises Lommel. "Aim for the side armor above the tracks. It's thinner there." The tank continues its advance, seemingly oblivious to the danger awaiting it. Its commander, secure inside the armored behemoth, is focused on reducing the church to rubble. The main gun elevates slightly, aiming at the damaged bell tower where several Rangers, including Staff Sergeant Petty, are positioned. "Now!" shouts Lommel as the tank presents its flank while turning toward the square. The bazooka gunner fires. The backblast in the confined space of the church entrance is deafening, filling the air with dust and smoke. The rocket streaks toward the tank, impacting precisely where Lommel indicated, but instead of penetrating, It explodes against the armored skirt, causing minimal damage. The tank is newer than intelligence suggested, with additional armor protection against shape-charge weapons like the bazooka. The tank's turret swivels toward the church entrance, having identified the source of the rocket attack. Its 75mm gun fires, the shell impacting just above the doors. Stone fragments fly through the entrance, striking the bazooka team and Lommel. The assistant gunner goes down, his chest torn open by stone shrapnel. The gunner is wounded but still functional, already reloading for another shot. "Fire and relocate," orders Lommel, bleeding from multiple fragment wounds on his face and arms. "They've got our position." The second rocket launches, this time aiming for the less protected rear of the tank. It strikes true, penetrating the engine compartment. The Panzer doesn't explode dramatically like in the movies, but smoke begins pouring from its rear vents. A mobility kill at minimum. The tank, though immobilized, is still dangerous. Its turret continues to function, the main gun firing methodically at Ranger positions. From his vantage point in the tower, Staff Sergeant Petty watches as German infantry use the disabled tank as a rallying point, setting up defensive positions around it. "They're digging in," he reports over the radio, "using the tank as a bunker." Colonel Rudder, receiving reports from all sectors, recognizes the change in German tactics. What began as a counterattack to retake Grand Camp has evolved into a defensive action to prevent further American advance. It's a positive sign. The Germans are no longer confident in their ability to dislodge the Rangers. "All units, hold positions," orders Rudder. "Conserve ammunition." Division reports reinforcements moving up from Omaha Beach. ETA 0400 hours. If the Rangers can hold until 0400, elements of the 29th Infantry Division with tank support will reach them, tipping the balance decisively. It's a matter of enduring for another 4 hours against an enemy who, while checked, is far from defeated. Inside the church, Private Fruehling helps Lommel bind his wounds. The stone fragments have left dozens of cuts across Lommel's face and upper body, none life-threatening individually, but the cumulative blood loss is concerning. "You should move to the aid station," suggests Fruehling, applying a pressure bandage to a particularly deep cut on Lommel's forearm. Lommel shakes his head. "I'm staying. We're short on officers as it is. Can't spare anyone who can still fight." It's the Ranger mentality. Continue the mission regardless of personal cost. Lommel will remain at his post until either physically incapable of performing his duties or relieved by proper authority. It's not heroism in the conventional sense, but rather a deep-seated commitment to the unit and the mission that transcends individual concerns. As midnight passes and June 8th begins, the battle for Grand Camp settles into a stalemate. Occasional firing breaks out as one side or the other probes for weakness, but the main German assault has been repulsed. The Rangers hold the village core, including the strategic church position. The Germans control approaches from the west, centered around their disabled tank. 4 more hours to hold. 4 more hours of vigilance despite exhaustion that borders on delirium for men who have been in combat almost continuously for 2 days. 4 more hours before relief arrives. For the Rangers who scaled the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc, it's just another impossible task in a war filled with them. 200 hours, June 8th, 1944. The battle for Grand Camp has devolved into what combat veterans call sniper's war. Sporadic firing between fixed positions, both sides too exhausted or cautious for major movements. Occasionally, a German mortar round impacts among the American positions, or a Ranger machine gunner fires a burst at suspected enemy movement. But largely, the night has settled into an uneasy quasi-truce as both forces await developments. Inside the damaged church, Colonel Rudder has established his command post behind the relative protection of the stone altar. Maps are spread across a makeshift table assembled from an unhinged door and ammunition crates. By the light of a shielded lantern, he studies the tactical situation, occasionally consulting with Lieutenant Eichner, who maintains radio contact with higher headquarters and outlying Ranger positions. "Status report," Rudder asks, his voice rough from the dust and smoke that fills the church interior. "Holding on all fronts," responds Eichner. "Germans appear to be consolidating rather than preparing another assault. They've brought up more infantry, but no additional armor observed." Casualties? Eichner consults his notebook. 7 KIA since entering Grand Camp. 23 wounded, 8 serious. Rudder nods grimly. More losses on top of those suffered at Pointe du Hoc. His battalion is being ground down hour by hour, man by man. Even with reinforcement from the 29th Infantry Division, the 2nd Rangers will soon be combat ineffective due to attrition. What began as a 225-man force now musters fewer than 70 unwounded effectives. And the 5th Battalion? Similar situation. They're holding the south and west approaches. Colonel Schneider reports approximately 60% combat effectiveness. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of a runner, a young ranger private whose name Rudder can't immediately recall. Testament to how many replacements have joined the unit since the original cadre trained in England. "Sir, Sergeant Petty reports increased vehicle movement to the west. Sounds like German armor." This is potentially serious. The disabled Panzer IV at the edge of town was manageable, but if the Germans have brought up additional tanks, the Rangers' hold on Grand Camp becomes tenuous at best. Their bazooka teams are down to a handful of rockets, and even those have proven less than effective against the newer German tanks with enhanced armor protection. "Tell Sergeant Petty to maintain observation and report any definitive sightings," orders Rudder, "and check with Division again on the ETA for our reinforcements." As the runner departs, Rudder turns back to his maps. The tactical situation is balanced on a knife edge. If German armor arrives before American reinforcements, Grand Camp could still be lost, despite everything the Rangers have sacrificed to take it. In another part of the church, Private Herbert Epstein sits with his back against a stone pillar, field stripping and cleaning his rifle for the 3rd time in as many hours. The repetitive task helps keep him awake despite exhaustion that makes his hands tremble and his vision blur. Private Fruehling approaches, carrying 2 canteen cups of something hot. "Coffee, sort of," he says, offering one to Epstein. "Found some old grounds in a house nearby. Tastes terrible, but it's hot and has caffeine." Epstein accepts the cup gratefully, sipping the bitter liquid. Fruehling is right. It barely qualifies as coffee, but the warmth and stimulation are welcome. The June night has turned unexpectedly cold, and the damaged church offers little protection from the wind that whispers through broken windows and holes in the roof. "Any word on when we're getting out of here?" asks Epstein, his voice flat with fatigue. Fruehling shakes his head. "Relief's supposed to arrive around 0400, 2 more hours if they're on schedule." "Which they won't be," says Epstein with the cynicism of a combat veteran. "Nothing in this war happens on schedule." They sit in companionable silence for a few minutes, sipping the ersatz coffee, listening to the occasional crack of a rifle shot or distant thump of a mortar. Around them, other Rangers maintain their vigilance at windows in defensive positions or catch brief moments of rest where circumstances allow. The relative quiet is shattered by the distinctive sound of tank engines, the high-pitched whine of German Maybach power plants. Multiple vehicles, by the sound of it, approaching from the west. Sergeant Petty's voice crackles over the radio. "Command, observation, German armor incoming. Count 3 Panzer IVs and supporting infantry. Estimate battalion strength. ETA to effective firing range, 5 minutes." Colonel Rudder receives the news with outward calm, though inwardly he recognizes the gravity of the situation. 3 tanks supported by fresh infantry against his exhausted, depleted force. The math is not favorable. "All units prepare for armor assault," he orders through the radio network. "Bazooka teams to designated positions. Conserve ammunition. Make every shot count." Throughout Grand Camp, the remaining Rangers move with renewed purpose, despite their exhaustion. The bazooka teams, only 3 operational at this point, take up positions covering likely tank approaches. Other Rangers prepare whatever anti-tank weapons they can improvise. Satchel charges, gammon bombs, bundles of grenades that might disable a track if not penetrate armor. Private First Class Lommel, his wounds bandaged but still seeping blood, organizes the defense of the church itself. If the tanks reach the square, We'll engage from multiple levels, he instructs his team. Aim for vision slits, hatches, anywhere the armor is weakest. Don't expose yourselves unnecessarily. The German tanks advance methodically, using infantry screens to protect against ambush. They've learned from their earlier experience. This assault is more coordinated, more cautious. The lead panzer fires ranging shots from its 75mm main gun, the high explosive rounds impacting among buildings at the edge of town. The message is clear: surrender or be destroyed systematically. Colonel Rudder has no intention of surrendering. Commence firing only on my command, he orders through the radio. Let them commit fully before we reveal our positions. The tanks continue their advance, now entering the outskirts of Grand Camp proper. Their engines echo off stone buildings, creating an auditory illusion of more vehicles than actually present. Accompanying infantry move house to house, clearing potential ambush positions. A time-consuming process that slows the overall advance, but maximizes security. In the church tower, Staff Sergeant Petty observes the German movement through binoculars, relaying information to Rudder's command post. Lead tank approaching Rue de la Mer, second and third following in echelon. Infantry, screening flanks, approximately squad strength per tank. Rudder makes his decision. All units, engage at will. Priority targets are infantry first, then tank treads and vision systems. The Rangers open fire simultaneously from multiple positions. The effect is devastating on the German infantry, who find themselves caught in interlocking fields of fire. Men fall by the dozen, others scramble for whatever cover they can find. But the tanks are largely immune to small arms, continuing their advance despite the chaos around them. The lead panzer, apparently identifying the church as a key position, trains its main gun on the damaged tower. Petty sees the turret swiveling toward his position but holds steady, continuing to relay observations. The tank fires. The shell impacts just below the observation position, sending stone fragments flying and further weakening the already damaged structure. "Displace! Displace!" shouts Petty to the men with him, recognizing that the tower is about to collapse. They scramble down the spiral staircase as the tank fires again. This time, the shell hits a critical support point. With a groaning of ancient timbers and crumbling masonry, the remainder of the church tower collapses, sending a plume of dust and debris skyward. Private Epstein and Private Fruehling, positioned near the front of the church, watch as the German tanks press their advantage. The lead panzer reaches the edge of the square, its main gun now firing directly into American positions in surrounding buildings. Rangers fall back where necessary, maintaining a cohesive defense despite the armor threat. "We need to stop that lead tank," says Epstein, observing how it's coordinating the German assault. Fruehling nods agreement but sees no obvious solution. Bazooka team is down to one rocket, and it didn't penetrate last time. Epstein's expression changes subtly, the 1,000-yard stare replaced by something more focused, more present. Satchel charge, under the tank. It's the only way. Fruehling immediately grasps what his friend is suggesting. "That's suicide. You'd never get close enough." "I can do it," says Epstein with quiet certainty. "Cover me with suppressing fire on the infantry. I'll handle the rest." Before Fruehling can argue further, Epstein moves to a nearby ammunition cache, assembling what he needs, a satchel charge with a short-fuse detonator. The canvas bag contains 20 pounds of Composition B explosive, enough to disable or destroy a tank if placed correctly against the vulnerable underside. "Epstein, don't," begins Fruehling, but he's interrupted by Colonel Rudder's voice on the radio. "All units, be advised. Friendly armor approaching from the east. 29th Division Advance Elements, ETA 10 minutes. Hold positions." The news should be encouraging, but 10 minutes might as well be an eternity given the current tactical situation. The German tanks are in the village center, systematically reducing Ranger positions. Without intervention, there might not be any Americans alive when relief arrives. Epstein has made his decision. With the satchel charge secured to his back, he moves to a side door of the church, waiting for an opportunity. When the lead tank rotates its turret away from his planned route, he gives Fruehling a nod. "Tell my parents I did something that mattered," he says simply. Then he's gone, sprinting across the debris-littered square toward the German tank. Fruehling and other Rangers provide covering fire, forcing the German infantry to seek cover rather than engage the lone runner. Epstein zigzags between craters and rubble piles, making himself a difficult target for the tank's coaxial machine gun. The tank commander spots the threat too late. Epstein reaches the vehicle, slides beneath it like a baseball player stealing home. He places the satchel charge against the relatively thin bottom armor, pulls the detonator pin, then pushes himself clear of the opposite side. He almost makes it. Almost. The tank's turret swivels, the coaxial MG-42 finding him as he emerges. Bullets tear through his legs and lower body, pinning him against a pile of rubble just yards from the tank. But it's too late for the German crew. The satchel charge detonates with a thunderous roar that lifts the 15-ton tank partially off the ground. The explosion ruptures the bottom armor, ignites ammunition and fuel, turning the armored vehicle into a metal coffin for its crew. Secondary explosions follow as ammunition cooks off inside the burning hulk. The other German tanks halt their advance, commanders reassessing now that their lead vehicle is destroyed and American reinforcements reportedly inbound. In the sudden lull, Rangers rush to Epstein's position. Private Fruehling reaches him first, dropping to his knees beside his friend. Epstein is still alive, but just barely. The machine gun has torn through his abdomen and legs, leaving wounds incompatible with survival, especially under battlefield conditions. "Did it work?" asks Epstein, his voice barely audible. "It worked," confirms Fruehling, taking his hand. "Tanks destroyed. Germans are pulling back." Epstein manages a small smile. "Worth it then." His eyes close. His breathing becomes shallow, then stops altogether. Private Herbert Epstein, formerly a law student from Brooklyn, dies in the rubble-strewn square of Grand Camp. One more casualty in the ongoing struggle to liberate Europe from Nazi occupation. Fruehling remains beside his friend's body as the sounds of battle diminish around him. To the east, the rumble of approaching American tanks can now be heard. The promised reinforcements from the 29th Infantry Division. They will arrive to find Grand Camp secured, though at terrible cost. Colonel Rudder receives confirmation that the German forces are withdrawing from the western approaches. With their armor advantage neutralized and American reinforcements approaching, they have chosen to fall back to more defensible positions. The battle for Grand Camp is effectively over. For the Rangers who fought here, as at Pointe du Hoc before it, victory brings little immediate satisfaction, only exhaustion, grief for fallen comrades, and the knowledge that tomorrow will likely bring more of the same. The war continues, and they with it, for as long as either endures. 600 hours, June 8, 1944. Dawn breaks over Grand Camp, illuminating a village transformed by battle. Buildings stand partially collapsed, their ancient stone facades pockmarked by bullets and shrapnel. The streets are littered with debris and bodies, German and American alike. In the central square, the burned-out hulk of a Panzer IV tank still smolders, black smoke rising to mingle with the morning mist. The Rangers of the 2nd Battalion have been relieved by elements of the 29th Infantry Division. Fresh troops now man the defensive positions around the village perimeter, their clean uniforms and alert postures in stark contrast to the filthy, exhausted Rangers they've replaced. Colonel Rudder has established a temporary command post in what was once the village mayor's office, a small stone building adjacent to the damaged church. Here he conducts the grim business of accounting for his battalion's losses while preparing for whatever mission might come next. Lieutenant Eichner, functioning as adjutant despite his own wounds and exhaustion, reads from a handwritten roster. Total casualties since initial landing at Pointe du Hoc: 67 confirmed killed in action, 31 missing presumed killed, 94 wounded but survived. Effective combat strength remaining: 78 men across all companies. The numbers are staggering. The 2nd Ranger Battalion has suffered nearly 70% casualties in just over 48 hours of combat. What began as an elite force of 225 hand-picked fighters has been reduced to a handful of exhausted survivors. In military terms, they are combat ineffective, a unit so depleted it can no longer fulfill its intended function. Rudder absorbs the information with the stoicism that has characterized his leadership throughout. Prepare a full report for division headquarters. Include recommendations for individual citations. Many of these men deserve recognition for what they've accomplished. Yes, sir, responds Eichner, making a note. Division has requested your presence at a command briefing at 0800 hours. Location is the command post at Vierville. Rudder nods acknowledgement. The war continues, regardless of what his men have already sacrificed. New missions, new objectives, new challenges await whatever remains of his battalion. Outside, the surviving Rangers have been consolidated in a relatively undamaged section of Grand Camp, a cluster of fishermen's cottages near the small harbor. Here they rest, eat their first hot meal in days, tend to minor wounds, and begin the process of psychological decompression after intense combat. Private First Class Leonard Lomel sits on a stone wall overlooking the harbor, a steaming mug of real coffee in his bandaged hands. His wounds have been properly cleaned and dressed by medical personnel from the 29th Division, the shrapnel fragments removed, antibiotics administered to prevent infection. The physical damage will heal. The psychological impact is less certain. Nearby, Private Robert Fruehling cleans his rifle, a ritual of normalcy in a world turned upside down. Though physically uninjured beyond minor cuts and bruises, he moves with the stiff, careful motions of a man whose body has been pushed beyond normal limits. Dark circles under his eyes speak to sleep deprivation that borders on hallucination. His hands tremble slightly as he reassembles the weapon. "Heard anything about what's next?" asks Fruehling, glancing up at Lomel. Lomel shakes his head. "Nothing official. Scuttlebutt says we might be pulled off the line for refit and replacements, but who knows? They might throw what's left of us at the next hard target." The conversation pauses as a group of replacement soldiers walks past. Fresh-faced young men, recently arrived from England, their uniforms still crisp, their expressions a mixture of awe and uncertainty as they observe the battle-hardened Rangers. These are the replacements who will fill the gaps left by the fallen, attempting to maintain the fiction that a unit continues unchanged despite catastrophic personnel turnover. "They look like kids," observes Fruehling. "Were we ever that young?" "About 100 years ago," replies Lomel with dark humor, "before Pointe du Hoc." The phrase has already taken on talismanic quality among the Rangers. Before Pointe du Hoc and after Pointe du Hoc, marking a dividing line in their lives as significant as before the war and after the war. Something fundamental changed for these men during those desperate hours on the Norman cliffs and fields. Something was forged that can never be undone. Staff Sergeant William Elrod Petty approaches, moving with the careful gait of a man nursing multiple injuries, none of which individually warrant medical evacuation, but which collectively make every movement an exercise in pain management. "Colonel wants to see all NCOs and officers at the command post," he informs Lomel. "Sounds like we've got our new orders." Lomel drains his coffee, stands with effort. "Already? We've barely had time to catch our breath." "War doesn't wait," says Petty, with the resignation of a professional soldier, especially not when it's going our way. The three Rangers walk together toward the mayor's office, where Rudder awaits. Around them, Grand Camp is showing the first tentative signs of returning to life. French civilians emerge from cellars and improvised shelters, assessing damage to their homes, retrieving possessions, beginning the process of reclaiming their village from war's devastation. An elderly Frenchman approaches the Rangers, his weathered face creased with emotion. In halting English, he expresses what seems to be gratitude, pressing a bottle of wine into Petty's hands, despite the sergeant's attempts to refuse. The man's eyes fill with tears as he tries to communicate something of the village's 4-year ordeal under German occupation. Petty accepts the wine finally, understanding that the gift is symbolic, an acknowledgement of sacrifice that transcends language barriers. The moment captures something essential about why they fight, beyond abstract concepts of duty or patriotism or even survival. There are real people being liberated, real lives being reclaimed from tyranny. At the command post, Colonel Rudder briefs his remaining officers and NCOs on their new assignment. The 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalions are indeed being withdrawn from the front lines, but not for the extended rest and refit they desperately need. Instead, they're being consolidated into a single provisional battalion and assigned to clear German resistance along the coastal region between Grand Camp and Isigny. "We move out at 1200 hours, concludes Rudder. "Get your men whatever rest you can before then." Division expects this to be a straightforward operation, but we've all heard that before. There are no complaints, no protests, not even from men who have been fighting continuously for days with minimal sleep. They are Rangers. This is what they do. As the briefing breaks up, Lamel approaches Colonel Rudder privately. "Sir, request permission to conduct a brief ceremony for our fallen before we move out." Rudder considers this for a moment, weighing operational necessities against the psychological needs of his men. "Granted, Sergeant. Keep it short. We roll out at 1200 regardless." At 1100 hours, the surviving Rangers of the 2nd Battalion gather in the square near the church. German prisoners under guard have been tasked with collecting American dead and arranging them in neat rows, each body covered with a blanket or shelter half. The Rangers form a loose semicircle around their fallen comrades, many leaning on rifles for support, others supporting wounded buddies who insisted on attending despite medical advice. Colonel Rudder steps forward. He is not a chaplain, not trained in delivering eulogies, but he is their commander, and in this moment, that must suffice. "Men of the 2nd Ranger Battalion," he begins, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "We gather to honor our comrades who have given the last full measure of devotion. They scaled the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc. They neutralized guns that threatened thousands of our fellow Americans. They held against overwhelming odds when lesser men would have broken. They fought house to house through Grand Camp." He pauses, looking at the covered forms before him. So many, too many. Each of these men had a story. Each had a family, hopes, dreams beyond this war. Each chose to become a Ranger, knowing the risks that choice entailed. They did not die for glory or for medals or for mention in dispatches. They died for each other, and for those who will come home because of what they did here. Another pause. Around him, Rangers stand at rigid attention despite exhaustion that makes such formality physically painful. Some weep openly. Others maintain the 1,000-yard stare that has become their default expression. All are present in a way that transcends their physical discomfort. "We cannot linger here," continues Rudder. "The war goes on, and with it, our duty. But we will carry these men with us, in our memories, in our actions, in our determination to complete what they helped begin. When people speak of the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc in years to come, they will speak of these men as much as those who survived." He steps back, renders a precise military salute to the fallen. Every Ranger present, regardless of physical condition, returns the salute with equal precision. It is perhaps the only tribute within their power to give. This acknowledgement that even in death, these men remain part of the unit, part of the brotherhood. The ceremony concludes without further speeches. The dead will be processed through official channels, their personal effects collected for return to next of kin, their bodies eventually interred in temporary battlefield cemeteries until more permanent arrangements can be made after the war. It is a brutally efficient system, necessarily so given the scale of loss in modern warfare. As the Rangers disperse to prepare for their next mission, Private Fruehling lingers briefly beside one particular blanket-covered form, Private Herbert Epstein, whose sacrifice the previous night likely saved many American lives. Fruehling doesn't speak, doesn't pray, simply stands in silent acknowledgement of a comrade's passing. Staff Sergeant Petty approaches, places a hand on Fruehling's shoulder. "Time to go, Private. Nothing more we can do for him here." Fruehling nods, turns away. There will be time for grief later, if they survive. For now, the mission continues. At precisely 1200 hours, the Consolidated Ranger Battalion moves out from Grand Camp, advancing eastward toward their next objective. They march in tactical formation, despite being in nominally secured territory. Hard lessons have been learned about the fluid nature of the front lines in Normandy. The war continues. The Rangers continue with it. This is D+2, and the battle for France has only begun. 1800 hours, June 8, 1944. The Consolidated Ranger Battalion has established defensive positions along a ridgeline overlooking the Ore River Valley near Isigny. Their advance from Grand Camp has been surprisingly unopposed. German forces appear to be withdrawing to more defensible lines further inland, abandoning the coastal region in the face of overwhelming Allied naval and air superiority. Colonel Rudder, coordinating with Colonel Schneider of the 5th Rangers, has organized the merged units into 3 companies, able to function independently but supporting each other as needed. It's an ad hoc arrangement necessitated by the severe casualties both battalions have suffered, but one that plays to the Rangers' strengths in small unit tactics and independent action. Private First Class Lamel, now effectively functioning as a platoon sergeant despite his technical rank, supervises the establishment of defensive positions for his section of the line. The men dig foxholes in the Norman soil, set up interlocking fields of fire, place anti-personnel mines along likely approach routes. These tasks are performed with the mechanical efficiency of those who have done them countless times before, despite exhaustion that makes even simple movements difficult. Dig deeper, Lamel advises a replacement private whose foxhole appears dangerously shallow. German 88s can penetrate 3 feet of packed earth. You want at least that between you and any incoming. The young soldier, Lamel can't recall his name, one of dozens of replacements integrated into the battalion after Pointe du Hoc, nods and resumes digging. His face is still unlined, unmarked by the stresses of combat. Lamel wonders how long that will last. Private Robert Fruling approaches, carrying a map case. "Colonel wants you at the CP," he tells Lamel. "Something about reconnaissance toward Isigny." Lamel nods, hands supervision of the defensive preparations to a corporal, and follows Fruling toward the command post established in a farmhouse at the center of the Ranger line. The farmhouse itself has been abandoned. Its occupants fled before the advancing tide of war. Personal possessions remain scattered throughout. Family photographs, children's toys, clothing, ghostly reminders of civilian lives disrupted. In what was once a dining room, Colonel Rudder and his staff have set up operations. Maps cover the table, radio operators maintain contact with adjacent units and higher headquarters. Runners come and go with messages. "Sergeant Lamel," acknowledges Rudder as the Ranger enters. "We need eyes on Isigny before the main force advances. Division reports the Germans have abandoned the town, but that seems too good to be true. I want confirmation." "Patrol strength, sir?" asked Lamel. "Small, 5 men. Quick reconnaissance only. Determine if the town is occupied and in what strength. No engagement unless unavoidable. Be back before 2200 hours." Lamel salutes. "Yes, sir." He selects his patrol members carefully. Experienced Rangers who survived Pointe du Hoc and Grand Camp. Men he trusts to maintain discipline and complete the mission. Private Fruling is an obvious choice, along with Corporal Edward Ferner, Private Joseph Rafferty, and Private First Class William DeGrasse. All have proven themselves under fire. All can be relied upon to follow orders and use initiative when circumstances demand. The patrol departs at 1900 hours, moving cross-country rather than following roads that might be observed or ambushed. They travel light, rifles, minimal ammunition, 1 day's rations, no excess equipment that might slow them or create noise. Their approach is cautious but steady, utilizing terrain features for concealment, maintaining appropriate intervals to minimize casualties from artillery or mortar fire. As twilight settles over the Norman landscape, they reach the outskirts of Isigny, a small market town straddling the Auri River, strategically significant as a road junction, connecting the invasion beaches with inland objectives. From a hedgerow overlooking the town, Lamel studies it through binoculars. "Looks deserted," he murmurs. "No movement, no vehicles, no sentries visible." "Could be a trap," suggests Fruling. "Germans are good at that. Make a place look abandoned, then hit whoever comes to investigate." Lamel nods agreement. "We'll circle the perimeter first, check all approaches. If it really is empty, we need to know when they left and in what direction." The patrol moves methodically around the town's outskirts, checking for signs of recent military activity. They find evidence of hasty German withdrawal, discarded equipment, vehicle tracks heading eastward, field kitchens abandoned with food still in cooking pots. All indications point to a rapid evacuation within the past 12 hours. They pulled out in a hurry, observes Corporal Ferner, examining tire tracks in soft ground near a former German bivouac area. Heading towards St. Lo, looks like. As darkness falls completely, Lommel makes the decision to enter Isigny itself. The patrol moves in tactical formation, 2 men advancing while others cover, leapfrogging from building to building, clearing each structure before moving to the next. The town appears genuinely abandoned, with no signs of civilian population either. "This is too easy," says Private Rafferty, his voice low. "Germans don't just give up strategic positions without a fight. Unless they're consolidating for a counterattack elsewhere," suggests de Grasse. "Pull back to more defensible terrain. Let us advance into a kill zone." The possibility hangs in the air, a sobering reminder that apparent victory can mask deadlier threats. The German army, though retreating, is far from defeated. It remains a formidable fighting force capable of sophisticated tactical maneuvers and devastating counterattacks. The patrol reaches the town center, a small square dominated by a stone church similar to the one in Grand Camp, though undamaged by combat. The square itself shows signs of recent German occupation. Sandbag machine gun positions, trenches dug between buildings, ammunition crates stacked in defensive configurations. But all have been abandoned, weapons and ammunition removed. Nothing left that might aid Allied forces. Lommel checks his watch. 2100 hours. They have time for a more thorough reconnaissance before returning to the battalion. Rafferty, de Grasse, check the northern sector. Ferner, Fruhling, with me to the river crossing. Meet back here at 2130. The patrol splits as ordered. Lommel leads his team toward the stone bridge that spans the Aure River, a critical infrastructure point that would normally be defended to the last man or demolished to slow enemy advance. The bridge appears intact, showing no signs of prepared demolition charges. "They left in a real hurry," comments Fruhling as they inspect the bridge structure. "Standard doctrine would be to wire this for demolition at minimum, unless they plan to counterattack and retake it," says Lommel. "No point destroying something you intend to use again soon." The implication is unsettling. If the Germans have left infrastructure intact, it suggests confidence in their ability to return. The withdrawal might be tactical rather than strategic, a temporary concession of ground to prepare a more effective defense or counterattack elsewhere. As they complete their inspection of the bridge, a sound freezes them in place, the unmistakable metallic click of a rifle bolt being operated. It comes from the far end of the bridge, the eastern bank of the river. "Cover," whispers Lommel, and the 3 Rangers melt into shadows against the stone bridge supports. Moments pass in tense silence. Then, voices, speaking French, not German. Civilians emerging cautiously from hiding places on the eastern side of the river, approaching the bridge with the tentative movements of those uncertain whether danger has truly passed. Lommel makes a quick decision. "I'm going to contact them. Cover me, but don't fire unless I give the signal." He steps out from cover, rifle pointed downward in a non-threatening posture. "Americans," he calls in the limited French taught during training. "Friends, allies." The civilians halt, conferring among themselves. Finally, an elderly man steps forward as their apparent spokesperson. His French is too rapid for Lommel's limited comprehension, but his gestures toward the east are clear enough. Warning, danger, threat. Corporal Ferner, who speaks passable French from time spent in French Morocco during the North African campaign, moves forward to translate. He says the Germans pulled out this morning, heading towards St. Lo. About 200 infantry, some vehicles, a few light armored cars. They were moving fast, not stopping to set up defensive positions. But they told the civilians they would return within days with reinforcements. "Ask if he saw any tanks or heavy artillery," instructs Lommel. Ferner translates the question, listens to the response. "No tanks here, but they've heard heavy vehicles moving on the main road east of town. Could be armor or artillery, he's not sure. The information confirms their observations while adding concerning details. The German withdrawal appears organized rather than chaotic, suggesting a planned redeployment rather than a rout. The mention of expected reinforcements is particularly troubling, indicating German confidence in their ability to stabilize the front and perhaps counterattack. Lommel thanks the civilians and advises them, through Ferner's translation, to remain clear of military installations and major roads in the coming days. Then he gathers his patrol and returns to the rendezvous point in the town square, where Rafferty and de Grasse are waiting with similar reports from the northern sector. "Town's clear," confirms Rafferty. "Found evidence of recent occupation. Cigarette butts still fresh. Ration tins not yet rusted. They haven't been gone long." With their reconnaissance complete, the patrol begins the return journey to the Ranger positions. They move more rapidly now that darkness provides cover, still maintaining tactical discipline but prioritizing speed to deliver their intelligence before it becomes stale. They reach the battalion command post at 22:15 hours, later than ordered but with comprehensive information. Colonel Rudder, despite the delay, receives their report with approval. "Good work. This confirms what division has been picking up from other reconnaissance elements. The Germans are conducting a strategic withdrawal to the Saint-Lô-Carentan line. They're giving up the coastal areas to concentrate their forces for a potential counterattack. The intelligence has significant implications for the Rangers' next mission. If the Germans have abandoned Isigny and similar coastal towns, the advance inland can proceed more rapidly than anticipated. But it also means stiffer resistance ahead as German forces consolidate along more defensible terrain. "Get some rest," Rudder tells the patrol members. "We move at first light. Division wants us to secure Isigny and establish blocking positions along the eastern approaches in case the Germans try to counterattack." As the patrol disperses, Private Fruhling falls in beside Lommel. "Think they'll hit us again tomorrow?" he asks. Lommel considers the question seriously. "Not immediately. They're regrouping, gathering strength. When they do hit back, it'll be in force. The question is where and when. And whether we'll still be around to see it," adds Fruhling with gallows humor. The two Rangers return to their foxholes in the defensive line, joining comrades already asleep despite the discomfort of their improvised shelters. Sleep is a precious commodity in combat zones, snatched in brief intervals, never sufficient, but essential to maintaining basic functionality. Lommel checks his weapon one final time, settles into his foxhole, and closes his eyes. Sleep comes with surprising speed, the body's desperate need overriding the mind's continued vigilance. His last conscious thought is a calculation of casualties. How many of the men around him will still be alive a week from now, a month, when the war finally ends? The answer, he suspects, is fewer than he cares to contemplate. 05:30 hours, June 9, 1944. Dawn breaks over the Norman landscape, revealing a scene of pastoral beauty, incongruously serving as the backdrop for industrial warfare. Morning mist rises from fields where wildflowers bloom among tank tracks. Birdsong provides counterpoint to the distant rumble of artillery. Nature continues its rhythms, indifferent to the human devastation unfolding across its canvas. The Rangers break camp with practiced efficiency, collapsing their temporary defensive positions, loading equipment onto the limited transportation provided by division. A handful of jeeps and 2.5-ton trucks, inadequate for the full battalion, but sufficient for essential gear and the wounded unable to march. Colonel Rudder briefs his officers on the day's objectives. "We'll secure Isigny by 0900, establish defensive positions along the eastern approaches, and prepare for possible counterattack. Division elements will follow and pass through our positions to continue the advance inland. Questions? There are none. The mission is straightforward, especially compared to the near-suicidal assault on Pointe du Hoc. After what these men have already endured, securing an abandoned town seems almost routine." The battalion moves out in tactical formation, despite intelligence suggesting the Germans have withdrawn from the area. Hard experience has taught the Rangers to trust nothing, to maintain combat readiness regardless of apparent safety. They advance cross-country rather than along roads, utilizing terrain features for concealment, maintaining appropriate intervals to minimize casualties from potential artillery or air attack. Private First Class Lomel leads his platoon, a mix of Pointe du Hoc veterans and fresh replacements who joined the unit after Grand Camp. The contrast between them is striking. The veterans move with the cautious efficiency of experienced hunters, alert to subtle signs of danger, conserving energy for when it might be needed. The replacements try to emulate this behavior, but lack the instincts forged in combat. Their movements either too hesitant or too aggressive. Keep it tight, Lomel advises a replacement whose positioning has drifted too far from the main group. Stay where fire teams can support each other. The young ranger, Lomel has learned his name is Anderson, a farm boy from Nebraska, nods and adjusts his position. Like most replacements, he's eager to learn, to be accepted by the veterans, to prove himself worthy of the ranger designation. Few will get the chance. Combat sorts men with brutal efficiency, and many replacements become casualties before they acquire the skills needed for survival. Private Fruling, walking point for the platoon, signals a halt. He spotted something ahead, movement at the edge of a woodlot overlooking their approach to Isigny. Lomel moves forward to assess, studying the area through binoculars. French civilians, he determines after a moment. Looks like they're gathering firewood, no weapons visible. The platoon resumes its advance, maintaining vigilance despite the apparent absence of enemy forces. They reach the outskirts of Isigny by 0730 hours, ahead of schedule due to the lack of resistance. The town appears much as the patrol left it the previous night, abandoned by both German military and French civilians, an empty stage awaiting new actors in the ongoing drama of war. Colonel Rudder establishes his command post in the town hall, a small stone building facing the central square. From here, he directs the Rangers in securing the town and establishing defensive positions along likely avenues of approach should the Germans attempt to retake it. Lomel, take your platoon to the eastern bridge. Set up interlocking fields of fire covering the road approach. I want early warning if the Germans come back this way. Lomel acknowledges the order, gathers his platoon, and moves toward the bridge over the Auray River, the same bridge his patrol reconnoitered the previous night. The structure is intact, a stone arch spanning the slow-moving water. On the far side lies the road to St. Lo, the direction of German withdrawal and potential counterattack. The platoon establishes defensive positions with practiced efficiency. Machine guns sighted to cover the bridge and road approach. Riflemen positioned to provide supporting fire. Observation posts established with clear views eastward. They improve their positions with entrenching tools, digging foxholes, constructing sangars from available materials, camouflaging their locations with vegetation. As they work, French civilians begin to return to Isigny. Cautiously at first, then in greater numbers as word spreads that the Americans have secured the town. They emerge from hiding places in the surrounding countryside or from cellars where they weathered the fighting. Many bring gifts for their liberators, bottles of Calvados, loaves of bread, eggs from carefully tended chickens. The Rangers accept these offerings with awkward gratitude, uncomfortable with being cast as heroes by people whose suffering under occupation they can barely comprehend. An elderly Frenchman approaches Lomel's position at the bridge, carrying a basket covered with a cloth. He speaks rapidly in French, gesturing eastward with evident agitation. Without Corporal Ferner to translate, Lomel struggles to understand. "Germans?" he asks, pointing in the direction the man indicated. "Germans coming back?" The Frenchman shakes his head, then makes a sweeping gesture with his arm and mimes falling to the ground. After several attempts at communication, Lomel grasps that the man is warning about something in the fields east of town, perhaps mines or booby traps left by the retreating Germans. "Sergeant," calls Private Anderson from his observation post. "Vehicle approaching from the east. Looks civilian." Lomel raises his binoculars. A horse-drawn cart is indeed approaching along the road from St. Lo, moving slowly, a single figure visible driving it. As it draws nearer, he can see it's an elderly farmer, his cart loaded with what appears to be household belongings. "Hold fire," orders Lommel. "Civilian evacuee." The cart reaches the eastern end of the bridge. The Rangers maintain their vigilance. The Germans have been known to use civilian vehicles as cover for infiltration or attacks. But this appears genuinely to be a farmer fleeing the fighting further inland, returning to Isigny now that the immediate danger has passed. Lommel approaches the cart, rifle lowered but ready. "Bonjour," he greets the farmer. "American, friend." The farmer nods, responds in rapid French that Lommel cannot follow. He gestures for the man to proceed across the bridge into town, where perhaps someone with better French skills can assist him. The farmer nods gratefully, urges his horse forward. As the cart reaches the center of the bridge, disaster strikes. A tremendous explosion erupts beneath it, sending horse, cart, driver, and sections of the stone bridge skyward in a cloud of dust and debris. The shockwave knocks Rangers nearby off their feet. Fragments of stone and metal rain down across the defensive positions. "Booby trap," shouts Lommel when his ears stop ringing. "Everybody check your sectors. Could be the signal for an attack." The Rangers snap to full alert, scanning their assigned areas for signs of German movement that might exploit the confusion. But no attack materializes. The bridge demolition appears to be a standalone event, perhaps triggered by pressure plates or motion sensors rather than remote detonation. When the dust settles, the extent of the damage becomes clear. The bridge has been effectively destroyed. Its center section collapsed into the river, rendering it impassable to vehicles and difficult even for infantry to cross. The horse and farmer have been obliterated by the explosion, recognizable only by scattered remains that the Rangers will later gather for burial. Colonel Rudder arrives quickly to assess the situation. "Delayed demolition," he determines after inspecting the damage. "Germans rigged it before withdrawal but didn't trigger it immediately, probably hoping to catch a larger American force crossing." The destruction of the bridge significantly impacts the tactical situation. The eastern approach to Isigny is now much more defensible against German counterattack, but it also hampers Allied advance in that direction. Engineers will be needed to construct a replacement bridge before heavy equipment can cross the Aare River here. "Maintain your positions," Rudder instructs Lommel. "This changes where the Germans might attack, but not the possibility that they will. Stay alert." Throughout the day, the Rangers improve their defensive positions around Isigny, adjusting to the new reality created by the bridge demolition. Additional Allied forces begin to arrive. Elements of the 29th Infantry Division, combat engineers to assess the destroyed bridge, artillery units setting up firing positions to support further advances. The small market town transforms into a military staging area, its narrow streets crowded with vehicles and soldiers, its buildings converted to command posts, aid stations, and supply depots. For the Rangers, this influx of conventional forces signals a transition in their role. Their specialty is not holding terrain, but taking objectives considered too difficult for regular infantry. With Isigny secured and follow-on forces in place, they will likely receive orders for a new mission. Another difficult objective requiring their unique capabilities. That evening, Lommel's platoon is relieved from its position at the destroyed bridge by a company from the 29th Infantry Division. They return to the Ranger assembly area in the town square, where hot food awaits, their first proper meal since before the Normandy landings. As darkness falls over Isigny, the Rangers gather in small groups, sharing cigarettes and war stories, processing their experiences through the dark humor characteristic of combat veterans. The replacements listen, wide-eyed to accounts of Pointe du Hoc and Grand Camp, trying to glean wisdom that might keep them alive in battles to come. Private Fruling sits beside Lommel as they eat from metal mess kits. "Heard anything about our next move?" he asks quietly. Lommel shakes his head. "Nothing official. Scuttlebutt says we might get pulled back to the beach area for regrouping. Battalion's been hit too hard to keep throwing us at objectives without reinforcement. Would be nice to sleep for about a week, says Fruling with a wistfulness that borders on desperation. Like all of them, he's operating on the edge of physical and psychological endurance, sustained more by training and unit cohesion than by individual resilience at this point. Before Lommel can respond, a runner approaches. "Sergeant Lommel?" "Colonel Rudder wants all platoon leaders at the CP. New orders coming in." So much for rest and reorganization. Whatever respite they might have hoped for will have to wait. The war continues its remorseless progression, and the Rangers with it. At the command post, Colonel Rudder briefs his officers and senior NCOs on their next mission. Division has identified a German artillery position near Carentan that's hindering the advance of the 101st Airborne. The guns are in a fortified farm compound that's proven difficult for conventional attack. We're being tasked to neutralize them. Maps are spread showing the objective, a cluster of stone farm buildings approximately 8 kilometers southwest of their current position. Intelligence suggests it houses a battery of 105mm howitzers with approximately company-strength infantry protection. "We move at 0300 hours, continues Rudder. "Night approach to achieve surprise. Demolition teams will take out the guns while the rest of the battalion provides covering fire and secures the perimeter." Questions? There are few questions. The mission parameters are clear, the objective straightforward. Yet every man present understands the risks involved. Another fortified position. Another desperate assault. Another opportunity for the already depleted Ranger battalions to suffer further casualties. As the briefing concludes, Lommel remains behind to clarify details specific to his platoon's role in the operation. When he finally emerges from the command post, the full weight of responsibility settles on his shoulders. He must prepare his men, veterans and replacements alike, for yet another combat operation with minimal rest and reorganization. He finds his platoon where he left them, most now sleeping on the ground, using packs or helmets as pillows. He wakes his squad leaders, briefs them quietly on the upcoming mission, instructs them to prepare the men for 0300 departure. The news is received with stoic professionalism. No complaints, no questions beyond operational necessities. These are Rangers. This is what they do. Private Fruling, overhearing the briefing, approaches Lommel afterward. "Another gun battery," he observes. "Apparently we're good at that." "Apparently," agrees Lommel with grim humor. "Get some sleep while you can. Tomorrow's going to be another long day." Fruling nods and returns to his makeshift sleeping position. Both men know that "sleep while you can" is easier said than done. Combat hypervigilance doesn't switch off simply because circumstances momentarily allow rest. Their bodies may lie down, their eyes may close, but their minds remain on alert, processing threats, reviewing tactical options, anticipating dangers. For the Rangers of Pointe du Hoc, true rest will come only when the war ends, or when they join comrades already fallen on Norman soil. 2:45 hours, June 10, 1944. The Rangers assemble in darkness on the outskirts of Isigny, checking weapons and equipment by feel rather than sight, speaking in whispers if at all. The consolidated battalion, still numbering fewer than 200 combat-effective men despite the integration of replacements, prepares for yet another mission that conventional wisdom would deem impossible. Colonel Rudder moves among them, a shadow among shadows, offering final instructions to officers and NCOs. His voice is hoarse from days of shouting orders over the din of battle, his movements betraying exhaustion that matches that of his men. But his resolve remains undiminished, a fixed point of certainty around which the Rangers orient themselves. "Remember," he reminds them, "speed and surprise. Get to those guns, neutralize them, and get out. We're not trying to hold the position." At precisely 0300 hours, the Rangers move out, advancing cross-country toward their objective near Carentan. They travel in tactical formation despite the darkness. Point elements, main body, flank security, rear guard. Each man follows the barely visible silhouette of the Ranger ahead, maintaining contact through subtle sounds and hand signals rather than voice communications. The night is overcast, providing good concealment but making navigation difficult. Lieutenant Eichner, serving as battalion navigator, relies on compass headings and careful pace counting to maintain their course across unfamiliar terrain. Occasional breaks in the cloud cover reveal stars that allow for course corrections, but largely they move through a darkness so complete it seems almost solid. Private First Class Lommel leads his platoon near the center of the formation. Despite his official rank, he functions effectively as a lieutenant, a consequence of the officer casualties suffered at Pointe du Hoc and Grand Camp. His platoon consists of 15 men, a mix of veterans and replacements, responsible for one of the demolition objectives in the upcoming operation. They advance through agricultural land, fields separated by the distinctive hedgerows of the Norman bocage. These earthen embankments, topped with dense vegetation, create natural defensive positions and significant obstacles to movement. The Rangers navigate them using techniques developed through hard experience, locating gaps, creating makeshift stairs with entrenching tools, boosting each other over when necessary. The physical demands are enormous, especially for men already exhausted from days of combat and minimal rest. Each hedgerow crossing requires strength they can barely muster. Yet they continue, driven by training, unit pride, and the simple understanding that failure means death, for themselves and for the conventional forces relying on them to neutralize the German artillery. Private Fruhling, serving as one of the platoon scouts, moves slightly ahead of the main element. His senses have sharpened through combat experience. He registers subtle changes in air movement, distinguishes between natural and man-made sounds, identifies potential threats through intuition as much as conscious observation. These skills have kept him alive while others died. They might not be enough tonight. Near 0430 hours, with the objective still approximately 2 kilometers distant, the point element signals a halt. Word passes silently back through the formation. German patrol ahead. The Rangers freeze in place, becoming indistinguishable from the terrain around them. Through night-adjusted vision, Lommel observes the German patrol. 4 soldiers moving along a farm track that intersects the Rangers' line of advance. They appear routine rather than alert, probably a scheduled security measure rather than response to detected American movement. Colonel Rudder moves forward to assess the situation, confers briefly with the officers near the point. The decision is made to let the patrol pass rather than engage. Even a brief firefight would alert the main German position to their approach, eliminating the crucial element of surprise. The Rangers remain motionless as the German patrol passes within 50 meters of their position. Only when the enemy soldiers are well clear does the American formation resume movement, now adjusting their route slightly to avoid potential contact with additional patrols. By 0515 hours, the first hints of dawn lighten the eastern horizon. The Rangers have reached the final approach to their objective, a ridgeline overlooking the farm compound housing the German artillery battery. From this vantage point, they can observe their target in the growing light. The intelligence assessment proves accurate. The battery consists of 4 105mm howitzers positioned in earthen emplacements around a cluster of stone farm buildings. German infantry have established defensive positions, machine gun nests, trenches, observation posts. The entire complex is surrounded by open ground, offering minimal cover for attacking forces. A deliberately cleared field of fire, extending approximately 200 yards in all directions. Colonel Rudder conducts a final briefing with his officers, adjusting the assault plan based on actual conditions observed. The battalion will divide into 4 elements, 3 assault teams targeting the guns and command facilities, while a support element provides covering fire from the ridgeline. Private First Class Lommel's platoon is assigned to neutralize the 2 howitzers on the eastern side of the compound. They will approach through a shallow drainage ditch that offers some concealment across the open ground, then breach the defensive perimeter and place demolition charges on the guns themselves. As the Rangers make final preparations, removing excess equipment that might create noise, checking weapons and demolition charges, the sky continues to lighten. The window for a surprise attack under cover of darkness is rapidly closing. If they don't move soon, they'll be caught in the open during full daylight, a potentially disastrous scenario. 2 minutes, whispers Colonel Rudder, checking his watch. All elements in position. The Rangers spread out along the ridgeline, assault teams preparing to advance, support elements setting up machine guns and sharpshooters to provide covering fire. The moment stretches, each man mentally rehearsing his role, controlling breathing to steady hands that tremble from exhaustion and adrenaline. "Execute!" comes the command, passed through whispers and hand signals. The assault begins in near silence. Rangers moving from the ridgeline into the drainage ditches and depressions that offer approach routes to the target. They advance in short rushes, freezing in place between movements, utilizing every scrap of available cover. The growing light works against them, increasing visibility with each passing minute. Private Fruehling moves near the front of Lomel's platoon, scanning for threats as they approach the eastern howitzers. The drainage ditch provides some concealment but minimal cover. A direct hit from artillery or even concentrated small arms would be devastating in the confined space. They reach the halfway point across the open ground without detection, a minor miracle given the increasingly favorable light conditions for the defenders. The German position appears oddly quiet, no sentries visible at some points where they would be expected, minimal movement around the gun emplacements. Something feels wrong. Lomel senses it too. He signals a momentary halt, studies the objective through binoculars despite the risk of reflection giving away their position. What he sees confirms his suspicion. The howitzers show signs of recent movement, drag marks in the earth around their emplacements. Different positioning than indicated in the intelligence briefing. The Rangers resume their advance, now moving with increased urgency as the tactical situation clarifies. They reach the perimeter of the farm compound just as full daylight illuminates the scene, still apparently undetected by German forces that seem undermanned for such a position. The reason becomes clear as Lomel's platoon breaches the perimeter. The Germans are in the process of displacing, moving their artillery to a new position. 2 howitzers have already been hitched to prime movers, crews preparing for departure. The others are in various stages of preparation for movement. The defensive infantry appears reduced as well, perhaps already dispatched to secure the new position. "Change of plan," Lomel whispers to his demolition team. "We take the guns now, before they can move them. Fruehling, with me on the loaded transporters. Anderson, Carter, place charges on the guns still in position." The element of surprise, nearly lost to daylight, is regained through the Germans' focus on their displacement activities. The Rangers are within the defensive perimeter before the alarm is raised, a startled sentry finally spotting movement and shouting a warning that comes too late. The battle erupts with sudden violence. Rangers from all assault elements engage simultaneously, catching many German soldiers unprepared. Machine gun fire from the support element on the ridgeline pins down defensive positions, preventing effective response to the Americans now inside their perimeter. Lomel leads his team toward the 2 howitzers already loaded on transporters. German artillery crews react with professional speed despite their surprise, some reaching for personal weapons, others attempting to man the vehicle-mounted machine guns that protect the prime movers. Private Fruehling engages the nearest gun crew with his M1 Garand, firing with controlled precision despite the chaos erupting around him. 3 Germans fall before they can bring weapons to bear. A 4th manages to fire a pistol, the round passing close enough to Fruehling's head that he feels its displacement of air. Lomel reaches the first transporter, firing his Thompson submachine gun one-handed while retrieving a satchel charge with the other. The German driver attempts to start the vehicle, but a burst from Lomel's Thompson eliminates this threat. He places the satchel charge on the howitzer's breech, sets the timer for 30 seconds, then moves immediately toward the second transporter. Around them, the battle for the farm compound intensifies. German infantry recover from their initial surprise, establishing defensive positions within buildings and behind stone walls. Machine gun fire crisscrosses the open areas, forcing Rangers to advance by fire and movement. Small teams providing covering fire, while others rush forward to new positions. Private Fruehling reaches the second transporter just ahead of Lomel, engaging its crew with his last full clip of ammunition. The vehicle's cab erupts in violence, windshield shattering, interior becoming a charnel house of blood and fragmented glass. Lommel places his second satchel charge, arms it with practiced efficiency despite the surrounding chaos. "Fall back!" he shouts to his platoon, no longer concerned with noise discipline now that the element of surprise is lost. Charges set. 30 seconds. The Rangers begin a fighting withdrawal, providing mutual covering fire as they retreat toward the drainage ditch that will offer some protection during their escape across open ground. German resistance stiffens as more defenders recover from the initial shock, bringing additional weapons to bear on the attacking Americans. The first satchel charge detonates with a thunderous roar that momentarily drowns out the sounds of small arms fire. The howitzer and its transporter disintegrate in a cloud of metal fragments and black smoke. Seconds later, the second charge follows, destroying the remaining prepared transport. Across the compound, similar explosions indicate success by other demolition teams. The German artillery battery is being systematically destroyed, guns rendered inoperable, ammunition cooking off in secondary explosions that further damage the farm buildings housing command and control elements. Colonel Rudder, observing from the ridgeline position, recognizes the moment to disengage. The mission objectives have been achieved, the howitzers neutralized or destroyed, their threat to advancing Allied forces eliminated. Continued engagement only increases the risk of Ranger casualties with no additional tactical benefit. "All units, withdraw," he orders through the radio network. "Objective secured. Return to Rally Point Alpha." The Rangers begin disengagement by elements, covering each other's retreat with disciplined fire. The German defenders, recovering from their initial disarray, mount increasingly effective resistance. Machine guns establishing interlocking fields of fire. Mortars beginning to impact among the withdrawing Americans. Private First Class Lommel supervises his platoon's withdrawal, ensuring wounded are assisted, maintaining covering fire until all his men are moving toward the drainage ditch that offers their best escape route. As the last to leave his position, he exposes himself to greater risk, a fact demonstrated when a German bullet finds his left shoulder, spinning him half around with the impact. Private Fruhling, already in the drainage ditch, sees Lommel hit. Without hesitation, he returns to his sergeant's position, firing his M1 to suppress the German shooters while helping Lommel to cover. "I'm okay," insists Lommel through gritted teeth, though blood soaks his left sleeve from shoulder to wrist. "Keep moving." Together, they make it to the relative safety of the drainage ditch, joining the remainder of their platoon in the fighting withdrawal across open ground toward the ridgeline. German fire follows them, machine gun rounds impacting dirt around them, mortar shells landing with increasing accuracy as German forward observers adjust their aim. The Rangers reach the ridgeline where their support element continues to provide covering fire, allowing the assault teams to disengage fully and begin movement toward the designated rally point. Only when all elements report successful withdrawal does the support element itself disengage, leapfrogging by teams to maintain suppressive fire until clear of the German response range. By 0630 hours, the Consolidated Ranger Battalion has reached Rally Point Alpha, a small woodlot approximately 1 kilometer from the target area. Here they conduct a hasty accounting of casualties and reorganization for movement back to friendly lines. The operation has been successful, but not without cost. 7 Rangers killed, 23 wounded to various degrees. Among the wounded, Private First Class Lommel's shoulder injury is significant, but not life-threatening. A through-and-through wound that has missed major blood vessels, but damaged muscle and possibly bone. Field medics work efficiently, treating the wounded in order of severity, preparing them for evacuation. Those with minor injuries receive basic treatment and return to duty immediately. The more severely wounded, including Lommel, require transport back to aid stations where surgical intervention is possible. Colonel Rudder, himself sporting a fresh shrapnel wound to his left calf, moves among his men, checking conditions, offering words of encouragement. When he reaches Lommel, He pauses to observe the medic's work on the younger ranger's shoulder. "Good job on those transporters," he tells Lamel. "Quick thinking. You likely saved lives by stopping those guns from relocating where we couldn't find them." Lamel nods acknowledgement, too focused on managing pain to form a proper response. The medic injects morphine, bringing blessed relief that clouds his awareness of subsequent conversations. He registers being loaded onto a stretcher, carried to a waiting jeep for transport to the rear echelon medical facilities. Private Fruling accompanies him, having been assigned to assist with wounded evacuation. As the jeep bounces along improvised roads toward Isigny, Lomel drifts in and out of consciousness, the morphine creating a dreamlike state where past and present intermingle. He sees again the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc, the streets of Grand Camp, the farm compound they've just attacked. The faces of rangers living and dead appear in his morphine-induced visions, men who scaled impossible cliffs, who held against overwhelming odds, who accomplished what military doctrine deemed unachievable. At the aid station established in Isigny's small hospital, doctors examine Lomel's wound and determine he requires evacuation to England for proper surgical treatment. The shoulder injury, while not immediately life-threatening, involves bone damage that could lead to permanent disability without specialized care. Private Fruling remains with him until the evacuation transport arrives, an ambulance that will take Lomel and other seriously wounded men to the beachhead for transfer to hospital ships offshore. "Looks like you're headed home, Sarge," says Fruling, as Lomel is prepared for transport. "Or England, at least." "War's not over," mumbles Lomel through morphine haze. "I'll be back." Fruling nods, though both men recognize the reality. Shoulder wounds like Lomel's typically mean the end of combat service. Even if surgery is successful, recovery time would extend well beyond the expected duration of the European campaign. For Private First Class Leonard Lomel, D-Day +4 likely marks the end of his war, at least in its combat phase. As the ambulance departs, Fruling returns to what remains of the Ranger Battalion, now preparing for yet another mission. The war continues its remorseless progression, consuming men in great gulps or small bites, returning some broken, others not at all. For those still standing, still capable of carrying weapons and following orders, there is only forward movement, the next objective, the next battle, the next test of endurance and courage. The sun rises fully over the Norman landscape, illuminating scenes of beauty and devastation in equal measure. Another day in the long march toward Berlin begins. Another day of triumph and tragedy for the Rangers who scaled the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc. June 6, 1984. 40 years to the day since the Rangers of the 2nd Battalion began their assault on Pointe du Hoc. The cliffs remain, though softened somewhat by time and erosion. The concrete gun emplacements still stand, broken, pockmarked by bullets and shrapnel. Monuments to violence now long past. A ceremony unfolds on the point, attended by aging veterans, political dignitaries, military representatives, and civilians come to honor extraordinary courage. Among those present are survivors of the original assault, men now in their 60s and 70s, their bodies bearing the marks of age and old wounds, their memories still vivid despite the passage of decades. Leonard Lomel, now a successful attorney in New Jersey, stands near the monument erected to commemorate the Rangers' achievement. His left shoulder, though fully functional following multiple surgeries, still aches in cold weather. A permanent reminder of that farmhouse assault 4 days after the initial landing. Beside him stands Robert Fruling, their friendship having endured long after the war that forged it. They listen as President Ronald Reagan delivers remarks that will become known as the Boys of Pointe du Hoc speech, a powerful tribute to the men who accomplished what seemed impossible on that June morning 40 years earlier. The president's words resonate across the now peaceful landscape. These are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. These are the heroes who helped end a war. For Lomel, Fruling, and the other survivors present, the words stir complex emotions. Pride in their accomplishments, certainly, but also grief for comrades lost, acknowledgement of the terrible cost, recognition that their celebrated heroism was born of necessity and circumstance rather than desire for glory. Following the ceremony, the veterans walked the ground of their greatest trial, retracing routes up the cliff face, identifying positions where they fought and bled, remembering comrades who never left this Norman headland. The landscape has changed. Bomb craters have softened into gentle depressions. The scarred earth has healed itself with grass and wildflowers. Nature reclaims what men briefly tore apart. Lommel stands at the spot where he found the German guns hidden in the orchard, the discovery and subsequent destruction that justified the entire operation and likely saved thousands of lives on the beaches below. The orchard is gone now, the terrain altered by 4 decades of agricultural use. But in his mind, he sees it clearly. The camouflage netting, the German gun crews, the moment when history pivoted on the actions of a few determined men. Strange to think it all happened here, remarks Fruling, his voice carrying the slight tremor of age. Feels like another lifetime. Another lifetime, another world, agrees Lommel. Sometimes I wonder if the young men we were then would recognize who we've become. They continue their private pilgrimage across Pointe du Hoc, eventually reaching the small cemetery where rangers who fell that day are buried. The neat rows of white crosses and stars of David stand in stark contrast to the chaos they commemorate, order imposed retrospectively on events that were anything but orderly. Lommel kneels with difficulty, his aging knees protesting, and places a small stone on the marker for Private Herbert Epstein, the young Jewish ranger from Brooklyn who sacrificed himself at Grand Camp to destroy a German tank. The simple gesture, drawn from Jewish tradition, acknowledges remembrance, that Epstein and his sacrifice have not been forgotten despite the passage of years. Do you think it was worth it? Asks Fruling suddenly, the question emerging from decades of reflection. All of it, the men we lost, what we went through, what it did to us afterward. Lommel considers this seriously, as he has many times over the 40 intervening years. The question haunts all combat veterans to some degree. Was the cost justified by the outcome? For the Rangers of Pointe du Hoc, the calculus seems clearer than for many. Their mission, though terribly costly, achieved tactical objectives of unquestionable significance. The guns were neutralized, Allied forces landed successfully, the liberation of Europe proceeded. I think it was necessary, he says finally. Whether anything so terrible can ever truly be worth it is a question I'm still not sure how to answer. But I know we did what needed doing, and I know the world would be darker if we hadn't. They stand in silence for a time, 2 old warriors contemplating mortality, their comrades, their own. The wind off the channel carries the scent of salt and seaweed, not so different from that June morning 40 years earlier when they approached these same cliffs in bouncing landing craft, seasick and terrified but determined. Later, as the formal proceedings conclude and participants disperse, Lommel finds a moment to stand alone at the cliff edge, looking down at the narrow strip of rocky beach where it all began. The tide is out, just as it was on D-Day morning. The beach looks impossibly small, the cliff impossibly high. That young men could scale this under enemy fire seems, even to one who did it, almost beyond belief. A park ranger, the modern, peaceful kind, approaches respectfully. "Excuse me, sir, were you here? On D-Day, I mean?" Lommel nods, not trusting his voice immediately. "Would you mind telling me about it?" asks the young man. "I give tours here, try to help people understand what happened. But it's different, hearing it from someone who lived it." Lommel has told his story many times over the years, to military historians, to journalists, to students, to his own children and grandchildren. Each telling distances him somewhat from the raw experience, transforming lived terror into narrative, chaos into coherence. Yet the fundamental truth remains unchanged beneath the inevitable shaping of memory and language. "We were young," he begins simply. "Younger than you are now, most of us. We were scared but tried not to show it. We were seasick from the channel crossing. And we had a job that needed doing, no matter the cost." As he speaks, describing the approach, the climbing, the discovery that the guns had been moved, The desperate search and eventual success, Lomel realizes this may be his final visit to Pointe du Hoc. Age and health make transatlantic travel increasingly difficult. The 40th anniversary seems an appropriate closure, a final farewell to the place that so profoundly shaped his life and the lives of all who survived it. The real heroes didn't go home, he concludes, a statement he has made many times before, but which has lost none of its conviction through repetition. The men who died here, at Grand Camp, all along the way to Germany, they're the ones who gave everything. The rest of us just gave what was asked of us, and were fortunate enough to live to remember. The young ranger thanks him with genuine emotion, understanding that he has received something precious, first-hand testimony that will soon be lost to time as the last World War II veterans pass from the scene. Already their numbers dwindle rapidly, the youngest now in their late 50s, many in their 70s and 80s. Soon the war will exist only in documents, recordings, and second-hand accounts. History, rather than living memory. As evening approaches, casting long shadows across the cratered landscape of Pointe du Hoc, the visiting veterans gather one final time before departing. They stand in a rough circle, these survivors of one of history's most audacious military operations. No formal ceremony now, no speeches or politicians. Just old comrades remembering shared ordeal and achievement. Someone produces a bottle of Calvados, the potent apple brandy native to Normandy. Plastic cups are distributed. A toast is proposed. To absent friends, the words echo across the peaceful promontory as the sun sinks toward the horizon. To absent friends, to those who climbed these cliffs and never left. To young men frozen in time while survivors grew old. To sacrifice beyond measure in service of causes larger than individual lives. Lomel drinks, feeling the fiery liquid burn a path to his stomach, a sensory connection to that distant June when local Calvados was among the first spoils of victory. Around him, other veterans perform the same ritual, their faces momentarily illuminated by memory, by shared understanding that transcends the need for words. In this moment, the distance between June 6, 1944 and June 6, 1984 seems to collapse. The young rangers and their aged selves coexist, separated by time but united by experiences so profound they define entire lives. What happened here 4 decades ago remains present for those who lived it. Not history but identity, not past but perpetual present. As darkness falls over Pointe du Hoc, the veterans depart, returning to lives built atop the foundation of what transpired here. They carry with them memories that most civilians cannot comprehend, bonds forged in crucibles few have entered, perspectives shaped by proximity to mankind's capacity for both atrocity and heroism. The cliffs remain, mute witnesses to extraordinary human courage. The concrete bunkers remain, monuments to the futility of fortification against determined assault. The craters remain, testament to violence now stilled but never fully erased. And the story remains, of men who did the impossible because it needed doing, who climbed when climbing seemed beyond human capability, who persevered when perseverance defied logical expectation. Their example endures long after the last veteran of Pointe du Hoc has joined comrades in eternal rest. In the gathering darkness, the wind whispers across empty emplacements where guns once threatened thousands. It carries no hint of the cacophony that once enveloped this promontory. No screaming shells, no chattering machine guns, no shouted orders or cries of the wounded. Only silence now, and the eternal rhythm of waves against the base of cliffs that witnessed both the worst and best of human potential. The Rangers have departed Pointe du Hoc for the final time, but what they accomplished here remains, carved into landscape and memory alike, immutable despite time's passage, a testament to what humans can achieve when necessity demands the seemingly impossible.